Ready? Are we ready? Welcome meeting. I'd like to call it to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. All right, Mrs. Castle, could we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Cunningham.
Here.
Mr. Cunningham.
She usually starts with me, so I wasn't sure. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. Dr. Drake.
Here.
Mr. Elliott.
Here.
Mr. Hipster.
Here.
Mrs. Hopkin. Mrs. McGinnis.
Here.
Mr. McCarrick.
Here.
Ms. Pennypacker.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll ask for a motion to approve the January 28th, 2021 board workshop minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, approved. Thank you. All right. Next, we'll work on our presentations. First, we have a review of the revised CDC guidelines for K-12 schools and potential next steps for UPSD focused on increasing in-person instruction. Dr. Roach and Dr. Farina, you're up.
Thank you. I want to make sure I had the right screen up. You guys can see the UPSD board workshop presentation? Great. That's quite a title you had there, Mrs. Cunningham, but that is the title. Tonight's presentation is really about kind of education and conversation and trying to bring the board up to speed about where we are and hopefully have a good discussion towards the end about any next steps. I know it's the topic of conversation across the county, across the state, all over the place. It's been ongoing since the beginning of the year. And I think it's a great time for us to have this conversation. Here we are on February 25th as we're starting to see some trends. So I know not everyone is able to dig into the numbers and a part of this COVID and school issues as we are on a daily basis, because that's what we do. But we're happy to present tonight and then answer some questions as well, and hopefully take a look forward at some next steps, as well as Dr. Farina and I, who will kind of pass off here and there, have some insight in terms of our workings with the county and the other superintendents and the work that's being done on the Anjan side. So we can provide some updates. So I'll take you through a couple things. I know everyone knows what the first slide is going to be because we've seen it a bunch of times. It's simply this document, but this is really important for us to come back to because this is the document that we've seen since last summer and where the cases are on the case counts. And I'm going to show you some data in a little while. So remember the low, moderate, substantial, right? Looking at the numbers of 0 to 10, 10 to 100, and 100 to 100 plus. That's all per 100,000, which does get skewed here in our area because when I show you the specific data for our municipalities, a small number of cases can look like a high number there, but we will share that. And then you see the positivity rate, right? Less than 5%, between 5 and 10, and then greater than 10. And those same models that we've been following for a while. And we have been kind of on this chart the whole time, even in substantial, even though it says full remote and we are in hybrid. Don't forget we had signed the attestation form back probably November, I believe, allowing that flexibility and knowing that we were following the chart as a part of that. And that was for us when we were in substantial. And so that'll come into play here as we move forward. So I'm sure there's no questions on this slide specifically, but it is important now as you see that, because the next slide here is going to be last Friday or 2 Fridays ago, the 12th, I believe. There was a lot of I got a lot of traffic and email and questions about the CDC because the CDC information came out, and that's really what a bulk of the presentation tonight is, to kind of just dissect what that is. At this time, Pennsylvania Department of Education, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, and Montgomery County Health Department or Office of Public Health have not adopted this. But this is what created a lot of conversation because it is CDC and it does raise there. So if you could think about turning this chart here, the blue color at the top, yellow and orange in the middle, and red at the bottom, it's the exact same chart I just showed you, just different. 0 to 9 in blue for cases per 100,000. Then the yellow and orange is the moderate from the previous group, just simply splitting it in half, 10 to 49 cases per 100,000, and then 50 to 99 at the upper level. So they kind of split the middle of the Pennsylvania department that we just had before. And then finally the red on the far right there tells you, and then you see the same basic percentages splitting in the middle between 5 and 9.9 in the yellow and orange, but they do give you more specific school considerations at the bottom. So blue and yellow look pretty much the same according to the document there, encouraging us to consider a reopen in full for in-person. And then in the orange, that 50 to 99 may still consider limited reopen as long as they can layer multi safety strategies. And all of these are continuing with masking and all the normal mitigation that is a part of that. And then red, still the same type of considerations that we would see in the other red or the other substantial category from PDE. Again, the new CDC information that was revised that came out on the 12th still holds a 6 foot distance. It still says that's the recommendation in terms of that information when you're in that substantial and high range. So again, we're going to continue to come back to 6 feet as we go through the conversation, but I know that there's conversations about other schools and those types of decisions. So not to confuse you even more, we whipped up a comparison of both of the charts on the same line here to help you understand that the PDE on the left with all blue, and then on the right in the pink, that middle grouping is really the yellow and orange, which represents the old piece. To me, this is helpful to see that it's not that different. It's simply split the middle group with the cases and have slightly different, recommendations in terms of, encourage everyone to consider all in or full in-person learning besides from the remote or full. But anyway, to me, this is a good chart, hopefully for people to see the difference, that it's not that different. It is different, but not that different. And then I don't have the chart because I don't want to confuse people, but many of you know that Chester and Delaware counties have put out additional guidance from what PDE has and what is here. And they are lowering in some of those areas. Chester specifically, that I saw the foot distance down, not to say it's any distance, but definitely lower than 6. I think it says 3 to 6. Everything says to the greatest extent possible that you strive for 6. But that is also some of the concerns that I have received in email from folks that are asking about increasing in-person instruction because this district or that district is doing that. So that's not on the screen tonight. We're not in Chester County. So therefore we don't necessarily follow that. Montgomery County has assured us that until PDE and DOH adopt the CDC, they're going to stay with this, although they do understand the recommendations that are on here from the CDC. It's not that kind of out of the whim that they just split that moderate group. Okay, so I'll take you through a couple other. This is the most recent positivity as of last Friday. We do have new numbers coming out tomorrow, and then obviously every Friday from there on this chart. So as of last Friday, Montgomery County tipped its toes back into moderate. You can kind of see the trend from November 6th all the way through, and there is data on the chart there back further, but that's the trend that's there. And I think Dr. Frini you color coded these for us to see the yellow, the orange, and the red there in terms of that coding piece. But you can see, again, as I said before, when we were doing this the whole time, we can't get too excited over 1 week. It seems like on the attestation form, it was at least 2, if not 3 weeks before you would do something. But that is the trend. And on a call today with Dr. Rubin from CHOP, as well as Dr. Arkush, they are seeing the trend continue. Like that's the anticipated trend of heading in this direction. And as we'll say many times today, I think the district's in a much different spot now than they were in the fall and or the winter with the mitigation and the factors that are going on at this point. So again, that is the data that is most up to date for the entire county. Now I'm going to show you the next two are going to be specific to our municipalities, which quite frankly is not as good as you would see it here in terms of going as low as 99.4 or 5.8. So here is the specific municipality data that is categorized and tallied every week. There is a little bit of a lag, so I won't get the 225 numbers until next Tuesday. But you can see overall it's a 130.9. Here is where I have conversations with people that are like, it's not fair for us to look at these numbers because we don't even have 100,000 people in this area and everything gets extrapolated. So if I can just kind of tell you that in East Greenville, you see 202.8. Now this math is not going to work out perfectly, but if I would only see a week where I see 1 case, I would typically see a 33.8 in there. So you can ramp up how many that was in terms of the number of cases. In Green Lane, 1 case in Green Lane. So look at last week, 440.5. 1 case in Green Lane would extrapolate out to a 220.3. So you can kind of see that those numbers there to represent the number of cases in the last bit of time there. It's 40 in Pennsburg, roughly 40 per case, 25.8 in Red Hill, 29, roughly 30 for Marlboro, and then 26.7 in Upper Hanover. So again, the math doesn't work out perfectly, but it gets you to that general sense of the cases. And the data of specific numbers of cases is on the chart in the same metrics document that we have. It's on the web. I could pull it up if someone wants to see that, to see the 7-day and 14-day in each of these municipalities. That information is there. But if you take these at what it is face value, the 130.9 is slightly higher than the 99 for the county. So we're slightly above that based upon those numbers. And here's the positivity rate. We're at a 7.1, and I believe the county was at a 5.8. Again, if you still look at the trends, you still see it headed in the right direction for us. Now, there are school districts in the county that are below the 99. That's how you get to that number, right? Some are above, some are below. There are others that are below as well, at least 6 or 7, I believe, that are below that 99. But that's the overall number that we've been driving and going at. So this lists the 14-day positivity rate over the course of that last week there. Then just to summarize up, and I think I have 2 slides here on what the CDC was sharing in that document, that it's important, it's really success in schools is about the combination of these mitigation strategies, which we feel very solid and consistent, and appreciate what our staff does every day, appreciate our students and our families participating and supporting this, because we have been successful as we have opened in the hybrid. The first 2 there are asterisk because those are the 2 most important that the CDC highlights as the universal and correct wearing of masks. We know we've talked about the correct wearing, as well as physical distancing, maintaining that 6 foot or as best or as feasible. That's part of it. The other ones that they highlighted in the document were hand washing and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and maintaining the healthy facilities, and including ventilation improvements, contact tracing in combination with isolation and quarantine, and in collaboration with our local health department, which we are doing on a constant basis. In addition, they talked about screening testing, the antigen testing program, which we have in full effect. And I believe there's more information coming out this next week that's going to be an added support for our staff as well as our students to test out of quarantine, which we're excited about. And also prioritizing vaccinations for schools is something the CDC is saying, which is happening in the county. We are trying to, Dr. Arkush, when they get the supply in, are trying to prioritize. They can't move to 1B until the 1A is finished and they get the okay. But they have opened up the expanded 1A for teachers that qualify, as well as prior to that expanded 1A, they did prioritize some of our special education staff, our special education paras, our nurses, and some other other staff that work within 6 feet of our students. So we do have some staff vaccinated, but we do not have the mass. The bulk of our staff has not had the opportunity yet to sign up, but that is a priority as best it can be, and we're working in conjunction with St. Luke's as well as one of their partners to see if and when that opens up for them. So we're working in 2 avenues on the vaccine front to make that happen. So we're doing the best that we can do in that area of vaccines, as well as all the areas that you see on the screen. And then the final piece I think of CDC was they talked about what school district leaders and schools should be following. So analyzing the community data, right? That's what we just did, and comparing that to the four color chart. Require masking and the correct way wearing masking. Plan to use the space. You may have to repurpose space. There are people about that are using. They're using the gymnasiums or auditoriums are different. They're using them differently, as well as they mentioned providing time for planning for teachers and staff to accommodate these new changes. Collaborate with local officials, which I think I know Dr. Farina has a hotline directly to the Office of Public Health, but we continue to do that with our weekly meetings and feeling supported from the county and from CHOP. If it wasn't for those relationships, we wouldn't even have the testing program up and running. Improve our facilities cleaning, which we have done, and ventilation to the greatest extent possible. And then they also talk about, look at formats and for sports, extracurriculars, and school events that some have to be prioritized over others. So, and then finally, the last thing I want to reiterate on the CDC piece was that they're continue to recommend in that document. There's nothing that came out of there that said ignore 6 feet or that type of thing. That it was there for families that do not live in the same household. From what I learned today, the CDC guidance is under review at PDE and DOH, but it's been there for 2 weeks. So that's not to say it's going to happen anytime soon, but it is there and being looked at. And if it has not been adopted, and the Office of Public Health has confirmed for us that at this time there's no change to their recommendations, and more specifically the exclusion criteria. It really comes down to that, going less than 6 feet, you're going to increase the number of students that potentially are going to be excluded based upon the close contact. That's kind of what it boils down to, and the different decisions that school districts and boards have made. Oh, there we go. And that's that balance that I think Dr. Farina and I have been both talking about together, at least, and now sharing with you guys in terms of the mitigation efforts, the social distancing, and the exclusion, the quarantine. Other counties have had what they've called a modified quarantine for a different amount of time based upon the amount of space, and that's not where our county is. So we're kind of stuck, not stuck, but we're supported by Montgomery County. That's who we follow their guidance as best we can, and that's kind of that. I'll pass over to you, Dr. Farina, because I know that the next couple slides are for yours.
Thank you, Dr. Roach. And Dr. Roach really hit on the theme, and that is assumed risk. So when we have the school discussion, some of the factors are constant. So mitigation and social distancing and what surrounds that is not going to change in this conversation. This is a factor that is static since the fall of 2020, and 6 feet is 6 feet. And so anything less than 6 feet, any reduction in 6 feet in our decisions, including athletics and transportation, and now increasing in-person instruction, increases our risk of exclusion and quarantine. So those two concepts are the same as they were in the fall. However, what is significantly different from the discussion in the fall is the district's response capacity to the virus. So we are able to identify, contain, quarantine, contact trace, and test. And those factors were not present in the fall. And so as we approach the discussion, we feel that it's fair to provide context about where we are conceptually as a district in terms of our enrollment, what it looks like by building, and then potentially as you phase in increased instruction, we're talking about the assumption of risk in the instructional environment and where those environments truthfully are in terms of space to student ratio. And so we're going to take the board and the community through the next several slides to give you a picture of where we are. So Dr. Roach, if you want to, thank you. So when we look at our current enrollment, and this is as of the 22nd, you will see, and I'll let you take a look at it, but approximately 76% of our students are face-to-face. We have 102 students at Hereford that attend 4 days. And then we look at our blue and gold days, 126 to 119, to a total of 245 students who are participating in the hybrid program that we currently offer. And remember, we asked for a declaration for, what families wanted to do moving in. And so that was presented as the last declaration. And so these numbers reflect those families who chose to come face-to-face, even knowing that there was an assumption of risks in the area of transportation. We have 111 students who participate in our UPEA program at Hereford. If we take a look at Marlboro, can you click, Dr. Roach? I can't, I'm sorry.
I did it go?
Oh, there. Thanks. When we look at Marlboro, we have 86 students coming in with us 4 days. We have a total of 229 students in our hybrid program and 98 students in the UPEA program. So again, we're looking at about 77% of the students who are assigned to Marlboro who are participating face-to-face. When we fast forward to the 4th and 5th grade center, you see we have 22 students who come face-to-face, 339 students who participate in the hybrid program, and then 115 families have elected to remain in UPEA and virtual throughout the course of the year. So again, we're looking at 76% of that total population. At the middle school, the picture looks a little different. We start to see, in-person dip in our hybrid program to an increase in full virtual. We have 31 students who come 4 days, 504 who split between the blue and gold days face-to-face. And then we have 276 families who indicated they wanted to participate in the virtual program at the time of declaration. And finally, if we look at our high school program, 58 of our students are there all 4 days, 526 split, 228 and 244 between our blue and gold days. And then 431 students participate in the full virtual program. So now we're starting to see of those 1,015, we're looking at just a little over half who are coming into the building on the blue and gold days respectively. And so as we think about those enrollment numbers and the percentage of kids attending face-to-face, remember from the declaration, we wanted to give the board and the community a picture of what that means compared to staff. And we increased, so if we held constant to the declaration and invited our families who elected to be hybrid and those who are 4-day into the buildings for more in-person instruction, what that would look like in the classroom setting. So if you remember back in the fall, we talked about 16, 17 being class sizes. And so if we moved the students back in person at Hereford, and you see grades 1, 2, and 3, you see the staff breakdown. At Hereford in first grade, it would be 18 students per class. Second grade is 19, and third grade is 17. And if I keep going across the same numbers, first grade at Marlboro is 20 students per class if we invited everyone back. Second grade is 19, third grade is 17. As we move on to the 4th and 5th grade center, we see that those class sizes would move to 22, and in 5th grade, 19. And so when we're looking at 17 being the 6-foot marker, you would see that in first, second, at Hereford and Marlboro, as well as 4th and 5th, we would be less than 6 feet in those classes. Certainly less than normal class size, but in some cases, we're talking about 1 or 2 students beyond the 17 marker. If we think about the increase of in-person instruction as we move to middle and high school, the conversation turns a little different because, they're multi-grade classes, kids are transitioning at multiple times. So the picture for if we invited all of those hybrid students back in, you would see we broke it down by section at the middle school. So how many sections would be over that number, that 6-foot marker? And so you can see, across 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, in basically almost 7, all of those sections, you would see represented less than 6 feet distance between students. At the high school, there are 436 sections that operate the high school. 79 of those sections draw class sizes of, which would yield less than 6 feet between students. The breakdown of what those sections would look like are outlined above. Obviously our science classrooms are places that truthfully we always have known going in and even discussing it in the fall because of the labs environment and the table settings. Bringing kids back would definitely yield a distance less than 6 feet. The range is 16 to 35 at the high school. We see some large classes, the choirs, the physical education and science being our most vulnerable in terms of having to reduce distance between students. The one factor that we want to make sure everyone is aware of, though, is that this is distance between students. And so the classrooms have been set up and established in a manner in which the expectation would be teachers would be able to maintain an appropriate social distance, always looking for that indicator of, less than 6 feet for 15 minutes consecutively. So, we're hoping that those instructional strategies and pacing and moving around the classroom would allow the prevention of that more than 15 minutes in any given class. And so as you can see, with our current hybrid numbers, if we moved into that, there is some volatility in section size and we would be beyond, but in many cases across many grade levels, it may be 1 or 2 students in a classroom that would tip us into less than 6 feet. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Roach. He's going to talk to us about some of the strategies that have been discussed and attempted, and where we go from here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Farina. And I think it's important to highlight again, I know Dr. Farina said it, but those numbers and those things you just saw were all based upon the current enrollment, making an assumption that if the decision was, the declaration what it was, and as of today or as of Friday, last Monday with those numbers, that would only be. So if we'll get into it in a little while, if there's going to be changes and or switches based upon some students that would have only gone in at 6 feet versus now wanting this or different choice, that could make it it will make a change there and a greater challenge. But what I do want to highlight here is that we continue to use the term increasing in-person learning, because we're already open. So we're talking about what our current model is and how do we increase that. So I do want to highlight that there's been several conversations, including at our task force, simply about Wednesdays. So that would be the time to potentially increase. So there were discussions about increasing Wednesdays based upon adding a day for blue and gold over a 2-week period to get 3 and 2 and 2 and 3. There was also a discussion about increasing kindergarten to 5 days a week. There's also about increasing virtual instruction on Wednesdays, or shorten a school day to provide cleaning at the end of the day, and then time there for maybe touching base with the virtual students. All those ideas were discussed at some length with a group of us, as well as with the task force and a couple others, to make sure that we're really looking at what we could do at that 6 feet area. But I know that from our task force discussion, which has 5 representatives from our teachers, as well as cross section of administrators and a board member, we had discussions there as well. And what came up at that discussion about the Wednesday specifically was the importance of the Wednesdays for cleaning and contact tracing. And I know this also came up at our curriculum and instruction committee meeting this past Monday. The importance of Wednesdays for cleaning and contact tracing, as well as that's what's helping to keep the doors open. We have not had a shutdown or revert to virtual, aside from snow, for any reasons, because and I think that the Wednesdays have helped tremendously in that cleaning between the blue and the gold groups, as well as providing that time for that contact tracing if in the event that something happens. Excuse me. In addition, what came out of our task force conversations with our teachers and our staff, as well as at Monday's meeting, was the importance of those days for our teachers in terms of planning and the collaboration that they need to do when they have students that are they're trying to keep students on pace with one another at a certain level, and they have students that are in the UPEA program, as well as in the virtual program as a part of the hybrid, as well as the in-person teachers. They need that time is valuable to them. They express that to the board at that time. As well as in 6 to 12, similar. Those teachers are faced with that dual platform of Zoom and live, something that's not familiar, but definitely challenging. So lessons that are being challenged and new ways to teach, and making sure you're keeping everyone engaged. So I know that we heard loud and clear the importance of that Wednesday. So the point of this slide here was to say that this is not simply a conversation about let's go less than 6 feet. This is a conversation about how else can we increase in-person learning, and that we tried to explore the utilization of Wednesdays with a couple of the strategies and the feedback we had. And I think many of the board members heard that, the importance of the cleaning and contact tracing, and making sure that we can touch base with our kids, as well as the importance for that planning period. So I'm sharing that with you. I want to just share quickly other topics that were discussed as a part of the task force conversations. We continue to talk about the current metrics. They get to see that a lot more than you guys do. The revised CDC information we went over. We actually went over a good portion of this presentation at our last meeting. We talked about obviously the exclusion criteria, the importance of vaccinations, and I gave an update from what I had from the county, as well as the vaccination information that Mrs. Fisher gets through her HR director conversations. And then we also have, as I mentioned, there's 5 teachers that are as a part of that group, and some of the UPEA representatives there shared their thoughts on increasing the in-person at less than 6 feet as well. So this would be a time, if I could, I don't know if Mr. Detweiler or any representative from UPEA was there, if they would like to say anything about the conversation, because I know we did talk about that. I'd have to stop sharing my screen so that we can do that. If they were there, if you wanted to raise your hand, there he is.
Howdy, how you guys doing?
Good.
Am I able to share my screen?
I don't know.
If not, no big deal. I can just, I just got a slide together just so it would be part of the record. But if not, it's no big deal. I can just email it.
Phil, do you want to try right now? Try and see if you can.
Yeah, no, that's
Well,
okay.
Phil, email it to me real quick. I'll pull it up as you're starting to talk. If you can email it.
Sure.
I can promote him, and then he should be able to do it.
Yeah, I thought he was, so it's open for all panelists.
Phil, do you want to try now? No? Yeah. Ah,
There we go.
You're on mute though, Phil.
All right, perfect. So I just got this slide together just to kind of get our thoughts together, what we're advocating for. And so these are the 6 really kind of musts that we are really kind of pushing that our staff need to have in place before we could really even consider going back to full in person. And so the first one being staff must have the opportunity to be vaccinated before returning to full in-person learning. 2, to best protect our staff, students, and their families, UPSD must maintain the 6 feet of social distancing. And 3, UPSD must maintain mandatory mask policies and all other current mitigation strategies for students and staff in our facilities. 4, before returning to full in-person learning, our community must be in the CDC moderate or yellow range for at least 3 consecutive weeks. According to the CDC guidelines, we are in the red or high transmission range. 5, in order to maximize social distancing, UPSD must maintain the virtual options for our students through the rest of the school year. And 6, virtual Wednesdays must remain in place for deep cleaning and instructional development related to pandemic learning. And again, we kind of began this marathon that is the COVID-19 pandemic with staff and students' safety as our #1 priority. And UPEA is simply advocating for our district to finish the race with the same priority in mind. And so that's really what I got together. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board would have on any of those items. But I just wanted to present it in a way that you guys could see and, kind of digest and, discuss.
Thanks, Phil. Does anyone have any questions for Phil while we have him on here? I can't see everyone because the screen's still up.
No questions, but it is nice to hear from our teachers, and about, I think the points about safety are very important.
I actually do have a question for Mr. Detweiler. The first bullet point, staff must have the opportunity to be vaccinated before returning to full in-person learning. Do you mean if there's less than 6 feet of social distancing?
No, I would say period. We need to have, we're relatively close to having the opportunity for staff to be vaccinated. So it's our position that we need to get vaccinated before we return to full in-person learning, regardless of the 6 foot rule.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
These bullet points, they are prioritized though, saying that like #1 is the utmost importance.
No, I would say number 1 is obviously, is very important, but I wouldn't prioritize any one over the other. We kind of value all 6 of these. We think they work in tandem. And to be honest, a lot of the things we're currently doing in terms of the 6 feet social distancing, the mitigation factors, some of these things are currently happening and the district is doing very well. So, I think we need to maintain those services that we're currently doing, but also consider the factors, especially having staff have the opportunity to be vaccinated before we consider returning to full in-person learning. That is the biggest one if we're looking at any of the 6. If you want to prioritize one, that would be the one.
So I have a question. So do you have any thoughts, Phil, as to, or have anybody asked, like, is everyone going to be vaccinated, or is it just going to be a few, or?
Say that one more time.
I said I just wondered if you had any thoughts ahead of time right now, if you've done any surveys or anything of how many teachers want to be vaccinated, because I'm going to assume that there's going to be some that don't want to, and then I just want to make sure we don't get to a point where you say you want them to have the opportunity, but do you have any
Again,
thoughts on how many are want to or not want to? Or-
I kind of anticipated that question. We haven't done any surveys per se, but I was reading a few articles, and I know the National Education Association put out some numbers on that. And they said about when they did a survey of their membership across the nation, now this is a national survey, it was in the 80 percentile range in terms of the amount of staff that would get vaccinated. And so I would assume we could apply that to our staff. And I mean, I'd be happy to put a survey out there to see where we are on that. I would assume it's going to be very high, but I did use the word opportunity in case some people, for whatever reason, did not want to get the vaccination. But again, that would be on their own decision to do that. We just want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to get that vaccination if they want it.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
David, did you have a question, or Alan?
I just want to clarify number 5 on there. That's a non-negotiable. We will have a virtual option the remainder of the year, regardless of anything that we do. Quite honestly, we're already planning a potential virtual option to start next year. So that will be there for our families, regardless of how this conversation or any decision moving forward.
Dana, did I
have
see
one.
you pop up? Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. One I have is on number 2. Phil, have you guys put any thought to how long? So obviously number 1 being priority and the other 5 being in tandem. But have you guys had any thoughts to number 2 of at some point, once you have had the opportunity to be vaccinated across your entire membership, at some point, obviously the maintaining of 6 feet may have to be lowered. I'm not sure when, but have you guys had a thought as to when that requirement goes away once you're in yellow or red?
I think that's kind of tough to answer just because we don't know what the future may bring in terms of the numbers, but we wanted to keep that in there because we also want to make sure that our students and their families are also protected, and that wearing masks and that 6 feet social distancing is critical in attaining that objective. And so that's why we wanted to keep that in there because yes, staff may be vaccinated, but our students aren't. And so they're at a high risk too, especially when they're closer than 6 feet.
Thank you.
Dana, go ahead. I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you.
I had my question answered. I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Carrie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So the 6 feet social distancing, and I'm sorry, I mentioned I had car trouble and I got a call right when Phil started speaking, so I may have missed this, but the 6 feet distancing in number 2, is that 6 feet for teachers or 6 feet for the teachers and the students? Because if I then look at number 4, whenever we're at full in person, there's not going to be that 6 feet. So what was the thought with the 6 feet in number 2?
Again, going back to that again, as we are right now in the levels that we are at in terms of the risk levels, I think that's where we want to maintain that 6 feet of distance. If we get into an area where we are, in a much lower transmission rate, I mean, maybe that's something we could revisit. But as of now, as we look, the 2 main mitigation factors is wearing masks and that 6 feet of social distance. So we want to keep that in place as long as possible, not just between us and students, but for all students and staff. So that we not only protect our students and staff in the building, but when those students and staff go home to their families as well. And so I think that's, the critical aspect right now of ensuring that as best we can is, again, wearing masks, 6 feet of social distance. And once those levels go down, I think that's something we could revisit. But as the numbers are right now, being in the red level, in one of the areas, I think it's key to maintain that 6 feet of social distance between everybody.
Okay, everybody, even like younger kids. I think there's been some studies that talk about the younger kids are a little less communicable.
And again, that's a little out of my depth. I don't want to necessarily answer that. I haven't seen that research, so I don't want to really comment on that. But if the research suggests that, we'd be open to discussions.
I'm a proponent of the 6 foot, by the way. I'm just wondering if it becomes how it becomes implemented as we hope everything gradually drops down and the cases drop, that we can resume properly without undue risk. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? And correct me if I'm wrong. When we went through the slides, Dr. Roach, if I didn't have a chance to quickly add them up, but if you take the actual numbers, aren't we talking about 20 people in the district having tested positive? And you might not have added them up either, but I'm just trying to.
What, you mean 20 people in the community?
Yeah,
You're talking about positive cases inside like students inside our schools and or the whole community. I mean, the
numbers were for the whole community.
Correct.
The ones you did by each town.
Yes, I can show you that. I can, when it gets the screen back, if you want, I can show you those numbers that show the actual number of cases, not the projected out to 100,000, the actual number of cases over the last 7 days and the last 14 days.
That's what I was
can show. Yeah, that's on the chart. It's not in the presentation, but I can show you that.
Okay. Yeah, no hurry. All right, no hurry. Anyone else have a question? I can only see like 5 people.
Mrs. Cunningham, I do.
Oh, great. Thanks, Peg.
I want to go back to the conversation with these 6 points. And as we're kind of circling through this, I guess the question to Mr. Detweiler is, and it's already kind of been answered, is if there was any flexibility or negotiating any of these points. Now, obviously, some of them you can't, but I know we're talking about less than 6 feet. I heard your answer, Mr. Detweiler. But something like if we wound up in the yellow range for 2 weeks, consecutive weeks, would that be considered? And as we approach spring break and we see things continue to get better, is there any flexibility in your mind with, 6 feet? And to what extent?
I mean, again, as we get there, I mean, for sure, I mean, we can revisit the numbers and then, make a decision whether we want to be flexible and begin to negotiate that. But as of now, I think it's pretty important for us to stay at that 3 consecutive week for the fact that we're in the red range currently. And, we would want to be in the yellow range for 3 consecutive weeks in order to start to consider going back to full in person. So I think once we start getting into that second week of yellow, I mean, for sure, that's something we could begin to talk about.
And what about the teachers that have been working less than 6 feet? What kind of conversations do you have with them, and how do they feel?
Quite frankly, fairly, stressed. It's a very stressful environment for them. They're professionals. They're some of the most dedicated teachers we have on our teaching staff. I mean, they are dedicated, beyond dedicated. And so they're going to work with those kids regardless, put their lives in this case on the line. And they continue to work in those conditions for their students. And but that's not to say that they have not been under a lot of stress since the beginning of the school year, because they, again, have been in person since for the majority of this school year. So they've done an amazing job, but again, it's under some pretty extreme conditions.
Thank you.
Anyone else have some questions?
Yeah, Keith.
Go ahead, Keith.
Mr. Detweiler, your committee that put this together, I'm assuming that they've gone back to pretty much all the people in the buildings, and you had your small committee there that formed these guidelines, these bullet points, but this is based on conversations with most of the staff in the district. Would that be correct assumption?
Yeah, we're constantly in contact with staff throughout our district. I mean, we're constantly, daily, I'm talking to people from every single building. And so that's something, I mean, we could get a detailed survey together of our staff. I don't mind doing that. And going over some of these things. So if you want to see the data, for example, how many people would be interested in being vaccinated versus not vaccinated, that's something we would be willing to put together to bring to the board if that's something you guys would want.
I just want to clarify that Mr. Detweiler was just asked yesterday about this presentation at the task force to see if he would be willing to talk, because I know that comes up from time to time at the meeting. So that was a short turnaround time, and I appreciate that. But I do want to just clarify this was not meant to be a public negotiations of parameters. It was simply meant to share their opinions and their views from the UPEA standpoint, because that's been asked before, and we value the relationship and the interactions that we've had. So I can hear the conversations. I'm not sure. I can't see Kyle on my screen. If I don't think it's really a public negotiation. I mean, that it's important to see that standpoint there, and important for the board to consider that as they're moving forward. If we have to have those type of conversations of as things get better, we continue to have that. I'm happy to have that with Mr. Detweiler and Mr. LaSalle and the team as well.
And Dr. Roach, I do appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. I do thank you, and thank you, Dr. Farina, as well.
You're always welcome. Always welcome to talk. We're always good with that. That way we hear all the sides of everything.
I need to ask my question again, because I'm still having trouble. Mr. Detweiler, can you define for me what you're calling full in-person learning? Because I'm having trouble differentiating between 1 and 2, because we have already long since established that we can't get everybody in our buildings unless we go less than 6 feet of social distancing. So I'm not clear what you mean by full in-person learning then.
If I were to define full in-person learning, I would kind of define it as that pre-pandemic classroom. So class sizes we had before the pandemic, classroom transitions, basically school as it was before the pandemic is what I would consider full in-person learning.
Okay, all right. So that would then be with less than 6 feet of social distancing, because before the pandemic, we did not have 6 feet of social distancing. So what you're saying is that, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're advocating for, that we don't go less than 6 feet until you've been vaccinated. But once you're vaccinated, then it's okay?
And again, I think that's something I still think it's super important for us to consider this students and their families with that. And so that's why I think it's important for us to maintain that 6-foot distance until those levels. I mean, we're in the red right now. So, I mean, it's something we could revisit in terms of a conversation when we get into those lesser phases. And for example, the yellow phase, that would be something we could, start to discuss. But at this point, being in the red phase, it's something, those are the two factors that have proven to keep people safe, and that's 6 feet of distance and wearing masks. And so I think we need to stick to that until we get to that yellow phase.
Thank you. I think I understand what you're saying a little bit better there. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry. So you don't want, so the UPEA doesn't really want to even have a conversation about full in person unless we're already at least 3 weeks of consecutive yellow range. Am I getting that right?
I think that's fair to say, yeah, because I mean, if you look at the CDC guidance in red, if we're in red, we should really be full virtual. And so to consider going to full in person when we're currently in red would, that's something we couldn't support. When we start to get into the yellow range, that's something, again, we could have a conversation about, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Before we put Phil off the hot seat? Okay, if you do, just unmute yourself and go ahead. Go ahead, Alan.
Well, I'll need the screen back to finish up the presentation.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Again, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for listening to us, and I look forward to speaking with you guys again.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, let me share again here. All right, you see the presentation, the same slide?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so that was a good a good segue into to these other clarifications. So again, I just talked a little bit. The previous slide was simply about other ways we tried to explore and maintaining 6 feet on the Wednesdays and all those discussions that we've had. I just want to clarify other conversations around this less than 6 feet piece here. And I understand what Mr. Detweiler was saying in terms of having the conversation, but we know that no matter what happens, if there's going to be a change, we can't wait until 3 more weeks to sit and wait until that happens to then be ready in the event that that is a decision that is made at some point. There is definitely a lot of legwork. It cannot turn around overnight. We got talking about bringing more people on or buses or whatever else the issue is. It definitely takes time, which is why we're having it now ahead of time in terms of the conversation. So 6 foot, just to clarify some of the conversations that we've already had about the less than 6 foot. Again, that's the goal is still 6 feet. If it, as you saw in one of those, if it was 17 students, it would be at 6 feet to the greatest extent possible and feasible. And that is some areas where other districts are hanging their hat that they are striving for that, but they fall short of that. But it's not saying it's 2 feet or 3 feet. And when you look at the actual math of that, it's between that 4 to 6 foot range for that, as well as what was stated from Dr. Farina before, maintaining that area for the teachers that they would have their 6 foot, so they would not be considered close contact in the event in the course of a day with that 15-minute time frame. Also, eyes wide open in terms of the conversations that the cafeterias would definitely need to change, or some of the structures that are there would go to tables. The distance for those students with seating charts again would be below 6 feet, so that would again fall in that close contact piece. Transportation is a challenge as it is. Adding additional students and additional cars on the road for drop off would all be challenges that we need to at least be upfront and aware of. I know I stressed this again prior. The numbers you saw today are the current 4-day students, blue and gold in person. So back in the early winter or late fall, we had that final declaration. We heard a lot of conversations. We were flexible with people once we made a decision on January 6th, 7th, I believe, and had a flurry of people that changed that declaration. So there was limitations in terms of if there was a lot of movement to those numbers, that could change and alter those numbers that you saw on the screen earlier and impact class size well beyond what we could maintain in a classroom, as well as for our teachers that are teaching and continue to teach in the UPOLA and or on the virtual side of that. So those are just things to be aware of, the limitations that are there. And then there's a question. So would we say we had the last declaration, therefore, if you chose in person, we're programming for you in person. If you chose if you chose virtual, then we're planning for you to be virtual. But other than that, we can't make any changes because we know the numbers that are there. Or do we need to ask families if we're making the assumption you're maintaining your current mode of instruction? If you needed to change, we would need to know that to see if it's even possible. Again, I do not want to do what I've seen other districts do, which has been devastating for the community, where they put out surveys and they say, if you want this and you want that, let us know. But I need 30% of you to choose this and 20% you to choose that. And then everyone gets what they want. And I guarantee it doesn't come out the right way, because I've seen it how it's, you're asking for something and then pulling it away. So we showed you the numbers that were there. What's based upon that, there's probably some little flexibility, but that is a discussion point that we need to iron out as we get closer to this. If we would need to ask families, kind of making the assumption that we're maintaining you based upon you chose in person, it happens to be hybrid. We would maintain that if there was anything less than anything more than that, or if you were in the UPOLA and the full virtual, that would be the same that we would keep there. We still have questions to answer as we have nuances here with this additional model, having additional staff being teaching students as we've committed to that online piece. One of the questions is what happens for our students in 1st to 5th grade, or it's K to 5, in terms of quarantining for a period of time. Right now, the way the structure has been built at the elementary level, there is a natural fit for that student to kind of stay fully virtual. But if all of the teachers that you saw on that chart there, because remember you have if groups of 3 or 4 teachers, if they were all teaching in person, that virtual option is not there anymore, with the exception of the UPOLA teachers that's there. And this comes down to a little bit what I just mentioned before, and that's coming off of the heels of Mr. Detweiler's conversation. Is timing is key here, right? We need to look at calendar changes. We'd have to revise the health and safety plan, and finding that natural entry point for this a change, if there was going to be one, moving forward as the numbers go down there, and trying to predict that is obviously very challenging over a course of time. So prior to the last slide here, I just want to reiterate that as we're looking ahead to 21-22, our goal is to be in a much better spot than we are now. I want to put it out there that our plan right now, with everything that we know, would be 5 days a week for K-12 with a virtual option. If requested, we would survey our students or get a questionnaire out to our families to know how many are interested in the. I got an email just yesterday from a family that was asking, is there still going to be a virtual option next year for X, Y, or Z reason? So that is currently the plan as we're moving forward. Now, however we finish this school year. So again, some further clarifications. And then finally, the last slide here before we kind of open it up to some board conversation and or questions. The recommendation tonight is to maintain our current model. We're not coming tonight to say, hey, make a change right now. We're coming to educate and have the conversation because I know we're getting asked from our public, and internally we're having the conversation about what things look like. We're recommending that we continue to monitor and share the county and local metrics as we have done, and continue to share with everyone. And they come out again Friday. We get the one set of data, the majority, and then the following Tuesday we get the next set. We're going to continue to gather additional information if there's something that the board needs to know to help better make a decision at a time where a decision needs to be made if that comes up. And then we're recommending we continue this conversation at the March meeting because we'll have 2 more weeks worth of information. And then, as I said before, timing is everything. If you're looking at the end of the year and spring break being that first week of April, that is the start of the 4th marking period for secondary schools. It's April, it's May, and then it's obviously a small June. We should get out decently in June based upon the schedule that we had started. So that when you see the end of June, it's a matter of where's an entry point if we're going to increase our in-person time. So the decision can be to continue to maintain 6 feet. I mean, the board can make a decision, hey, and give us guidance that we feel comfortable with these numbers or these percentages based upon that, or just let's continue to have this conversation. But we know that it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to change models, as there's a lot of moving parts to doing that. And I'll quote one of our teachers that said, we're just getting good at hybrid. And that's good. That's 6 weeks in and things are going well. And that's an attribute to our staff and to our administrators that are busting in all levels. We heard they did a great job March through June, and then they did a great job virtually. Things were going well, and now they're doing well in hybrid. So this is not about trying to change it up again for the staff, because that's not the case. Just the question here is I owe it as to you as superintendent to present the information to you, to share it as clearly as I can, to share with you a recommendation in terms of that this is the necessary time to have this conversation, and then and see if you guys have questions. Or Dr. Freeman, is there anything that I missed as we were prepping for today?
No, I'm happy to entertain any questions. I said it's the same topic, but our ability as a district to respond is very different. And I'm happy to answer any questions related to that, or any questions related to district acuity and my observations as the pandemic coordinator.
Could we unshare your screen, Alan, so I can see everybody or almost everybody?
Yep.
Thank you. Anybody want to start it off? Questions, comments?
Madam
No?
President, if I could, just one clarification, as Dr. Roach mentioned, that the decision, just to sort of add clarity after the discussion with the union representative, is that it is fully within the discretion of the board to determine the number of days that school is open for all students. So certainly the teachers and other staff members throughout the district, their feedback is I know, welcomed by the board and valued, but ultimately it is your decision. There is not a negotiation that needs to take place in terms of the number of days that students are permitted to come in and what number of students are permitted to come in. So I think all of the board members understand that, but just since we do have some members of the public watching, just to have that be clear as well.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate the clarification. Anyone have comments on this? Thoughts? Don't everyone jump at once.
I had a question.
Go ahead, Carrie.
How are the self-attestation forms going? Are you getting good compliance with that? I mean, it seems to me that the way that we get to the right place here is to have the virus as low as possible, and then to make sure if any student population has it or teachers, that they're screened before they get in the door so that they don't spread it to anybody else. And I think you had I think it was called an attestation form that parents would sign and say, yes, our child doesn't have a fever and doesn't have any symptoms and go in. Are we getting good compliance with that? Because
So
that will help screen out.
yeah, so I would have to vet out with the principals. What the process is that anybody who fails the wellness screener does not report to school. We have a very strict protocol about what happens, which includes some really annoying emails if you're absent as well. And then there's strict follow-up. So, you know, I think that there are kids who don't complete it. They get put in a spreadsheet and we screen them there, and then we follow up with our protocol. Since the beginning of the year, we've been able to then extend that to anybody who falls ill during school, whose parents consent. You know, we can provide an antigen test to determine if they have some level of virus in them, and then we can immediately identify them, exclude them, and quarantine. I mean, our response time from the fall to now and our response protocol from fall to now is excessively different. I mean, I feel very confident in our team. Our nurses are incredible. You know, some would contend we're a little aggressive about it, but really it is to protect everyone. What I would hope is that more of our staff would participate in antigen testing, which is the surveillance testing, which makes sure that they're safe. It's weekly. You know, we have about a third of the staff doing it now. It is intended to be a mitigation strategy. I would certainly hope that we get more over time, and we have gotten more staff once they've seen how sort of quick and easy the process is. But all of those mechanisms were intended to buffer our reality, which is kids coming back to school. You know, we want them there. We know 6 feet all in. It is not something we can do. We've been talking about that since the beginning of the year. I think in terms of virus, Dr. Drake, in terms of actual positive cases, we have not seen a lot in school. We just have not. And so, you know, I think it's because our community is very thoughtful and they follow those protocols that we've put in place. And we're able to respond very quickly to contain any positive case. What we do see is kids in quarantine because their parents are positive. And so prescribed by the county, if you live in the house of somebody who's positive, you too get identified as positive. So when you look at our district data, very often, even if you go to that monthly COVID report or weekly COVID report, you'll see cases. By and large, it's because someone in their family, an adult in their home, was positive. But I'm very grateful because the families are very honest about it.
Okay.
So they don't even come into the building at all. They're just positive, and so we report it. And so, you know, I would say particularly at the elementary schools, students themselves have not yielded positive COVID results. We just have not seen them. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We just have not. Our positive cases tend to come, and I'm sorry to say this, from the athletic arena. And so of older children, and not necessarily school sports. I just want to be clear, recreational sports, youth sports out in the community. And so those are our realities currently as we respond to cases as they come in.
Okay, I thought I heard a few weeks ago that you were having some issues with parents completing those forms, but that's no longer the case?
Well, I think we continue to be fairly aggressive in following up with families. You and me, if you don't do the form or if you fail the form, we had families filling it out incorrectly too. So we had to spend some time rethinking it and providing some additional support because you know, it is nuanced. And if you have 2 symptoms that look like this, you quarantine, but only one of this. And so what we found is a lot of families were being, I hate to say overly precautious because that's good, but they didn't need to quarantine, but they felt like, you know, I have the sniffles, I better stay home. Like, so, you know, we've come a long way. We're weeks into it. And I think, you know, it's well intact. Doesn't mean that people don't forget.
Okay, my point bringing it up was just the way that we control this is everybody has a responsibility, including the parents. So as long as we do a good job collectively as the parents to make sure we don't get children in the building that may have symptoms that we didn't fill in the form properly or didn't fill it in at all. So it sounds like that's no longer an issue from what you're saying, or it's much less of an issue than it was a few weeks ago.
I think I think that as is always the case, we have a small group of people who we need to continuously remind.
Mhm.
And so I don't want to ever say we won't have to do that, but I would say by and large, we have great kids and great parents and they do what we ask them because they really want their kids, to stay in school and they don't want the school to close.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr.
Keith,
Drake,
I
that's,
think-
so real quick, I want to first, Dr. Drake, that's the nice part about the program that Dr. Farina's put together with the antigen testing. So the students that are a part of that, I mean, as far as if they fall ill at school, that can be ruled out right away as long as the parents have provided permission and send in their QR code that symptomatic testing. If they did pass the screener but came in and fell ill, and they did preset the information to the nurse or have it with them, then they can get a test on the spot within 20 minutes to find out if it's simply just not feeling well because they had too many cheese sandwiches at lunch, or if it's because they do have something wrong associated with COVID. And that helps maintain that student does not continue out through the day with other students. So.
Keith, did you have a question?
I had more of a comment than anything. I think we have some great mitigation strategies in place. Our administration, our teachers, all of our staff are doing well with dealing with this. The numbers are starting to trend down. It looks like it's improving slowly, which is encouraging. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can come back with on March 19th. There's really not a lot that we can decide upon at this point, but we do have some great information to review and publish to our community.
Yeah, I agree. Anyone else?
I'll just pop in one thing real quick. As far as the conversation went in regards to the Wednesdays being used, if no one's had a chance to take a look at, or if someone is interested in taking a look at learning more about what happens on the Wednesdays, at the curriculum and instruction meeting that we had on Monday night, there was a really great discussion about what happens on those Wednesdays, and you heard from our teachers about all the time and effort that they put into that and about how they're using it. And I think it was a really productive conversation. It was great to hear from the teachers who were there. And so if anybody has any interest, that was a real good meeting to listen to and to hear the parts of what they had to say about some of that stuff, because there are so many different things to consider. And you heard Dr. Roche and Dr. Farina talk about that tonight. Because you just don't talk about getting back into schools. Like, what does the busing look like? What does the cafeteria look like? And there's so many different things to think about. It's a little overwhelming. So thank you to everybody for their time and effort. And to Keith's point, yeah, like you just have to keep evaluating data and try to make the best decisions that you can while following the guidelines and trying to do the best to keep, schools as open as much as you can to as many kids as you can. So thank you to everybody for their hard work on that. I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
I agree with that completely, Mike. I think, but I recognize we're going to need more than overnight to say, okay, we're 4 days in, everybody 4 days in. So, it would be my suggestion that obviously when we come back, I guess, March 11th would be our next meeting. So then by that time, we'll have 3 weeks in to what is a lot lower of, numbers from the county. And I hope everyone would be thinking about what kind of metrics would be acceptable to them to say, yep, 4 days in for everybody, or what we need to do. Because again, it's going to take a few weeks to get that all together.
It is. And one of the things, I don't know who I interrupted, I'm sorry. But one of the things is, and keeping the kids safe. One of the things we hear time and time again is the spacing, that 6 feet of distance. And, you hear that there are some people that only come because there's the 6 foot of distance. So I think it's trying to find that balance, because you don't want all of a sudden go, hey, it's 2 feet. And like, there are people are like, no, and they run away. It's trying to find that balance for everybody. And there's a lot of things for all of us here to consider. And yeah. Whew.
I think just another point you just reminded me of, Mike, is we have a lot of kids right now that hopefully would be able to come back, from our charter schools and the cyber schools. It would be really nice to have them back. I know that's a gigantic expense for the district. And, we're doing all the right things, and our instruction is right, and we're doing it well. So I don't know if that's part of, only being half, blue and gold and 2 days virtual and 2 days in. I don't know if that's keeping some of those students out. So
No, that's
I would just get them
understandable.
back.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, one of the nice things that the advantages we have over charter schools is that we're held to different higher standards in a lot of cases. So I think that's a benefit, and it's nice to see our virtual program grow. And I think it's nice that we're paying attention to it and trying to, make it be the best program that it can be, because it takes time to develop stuff. But I think we're making good progress.
Yeah, I agree.
We did have when we had a big exit of students, was probably more in the fall and early winter with when we were still in the full virtual. There were people that were looking for other options or other in-person settings that had that were in person for that cause, as well as some to cyber and some to homeschooling. So that is the truth in terms of when we did lose a number of students from where we were, and would love to have them back moving forward. My question as we're wrapping up this conversation, because I know we have two fantastic presentations coming ahead, is there anything the board needs, and I don't need to know right now, before the 11th? Is there other data? Is there other things that, this information would be helpful for us as we go forward? We will have 2 more sets of county data and local data. Like I said, tomorrow, and then the following Friday, that information will be available to be included in here, as well as 2 more Tuesdays worth of the county data specifically. So if there's anything that the board thinks of, whether it's right now or at the end of the meeting, feel free to contact me so that we can get our team to put that together to make the most informed decision that we can. And it's possible that on the 11th, we won't have it. We could see a spike go the other way. So I don't know. That's why I said I'm hoping that what you saw tonight from Dr. Frieden and I was confidence that we're looking at all options, that we're trying to be open and transparent with the information that we have a great community discussion, to show confidence to our parents that we are looking at all the options. Again, I still think it comes down to that 6-foot piece, but it also comes down to we have community members and parents and that want their kids more in school, and they keep asking the questions. So that was a part of this conversation, was to show that it's not being looked at. These are all the metrics, and they can't simplify them down. So if you're overwhelmed, mission accomplished for us, because we were trying to put it all out there to make sure that you had all the information and go from there.
To quote Bruce Willis, Dr. Roach, I would like to say, welcome to the party, pal. Right? It is a little overwhelming at times.
All right.
Thank you. I'm glad you used that Bruce Willis quote.
Yeah. Judy, go ahead, Judy.
So I'd actually like to, ask Kyle a question. He's probably the person who can answer my question the best. If we look at bringing students in, we know we have to get rid of 6 feet of social distancing. There's just no way to do it without getting rid of the 6 feet of social distancing. So my question to you, Kyle, is we have students who are currently in the virtual model, and we have provided them with the safest learning environment possible because we're following all the guidelines. If we go in direct violation of Montgomery County Department of Public Health and say, we're getting rid of social distancing and bringing everybody back in, and we have students who are currently in hybrid who the parents say, no, that's not safe. You can't do that. Have we just denied them FAPE?
So I think there's, I guess, two points to look at. One is that there would continue to be a virtual option. So
which we've already established isn't adequate enough. That's why we're trying to bring students in more. That's the glitch I keep having in my head. If we're saying the kids need to be in front of teachers to get better education, then how can we then say, but those of you who want to follow the guidelines, too bad, you have to stay virtual. I know that sounds horrible, but that's how I keep hearing this in my head. Is we're saying, if you want to follow guidelines, you have to stick to what you consider an inferior education because we're not going to provide you the safe education. And I have this liability issue of faith really bad right now.
Sure. So I think one other, I guess, aspect is that there may also be families that would suggest that is 2 days of in-person sufficient enough for a FAPE, or is 4 days or 5 days. And I think the other piece is that from a legal perspective, the students who have an individual right to a free and appropriate public education are students with disabilities. Any other students, we certainly have an obligation to provide an appropriate education to students without disabilities, but there is no individual legal right to enforce that from an individual student perspective. I think, for the board to consider, I guess, is that certainly the best education is every day in person under normal circumstances. And obviously, because we're in a pandemic, we are limited in our ability to provide that. And that's just the reality of it. So from a liability perspective, I think the question, or I would imagine a question is, if we go less than 6 feet, is that permissible? Is that a risk? And I think that what we have seen at the state level and what that we're seeing from a county level is certainly a recommendation of maintaining 6 feet. But I think what we're hearing even more so at the county level is we understand that some of our communities may look at the 6 feet requirement and may weigh the risk factors. And we understand that our communities will do that. And what we're not hearing from the County Department of Health is we're going to come in and close down schools that go less than 6 feet because we don't think it's safe. And I think it's important to know that under state regulations, the primary responsibility for mitigating disease in school lies with the county health department. The role of that is their role is to limit and mitigate disease within schools. And so, certainly I think if the county health department thought that it was unsafe for schools that have gone below 6 feet, they'd have an obligation to stop them. Now, they're not doing that. So I think, would we face liability if we go beyond or below the 6 feet? Does it increase the chances? Perhaps, but is it an unacceptable level of risk? I think that what we're hearing from the county health department is every community needs to assess where they are in terms of what the numbers look like within their community, what their overall mitigation measures are, how they are followed, and each community needs to make a determination of what is best for that community at that particular moment. That's not very helpful for, all of us in that we don't, have clear direction sometimes, and it's left up to the group here to make those decisions. But I think that's what we're hearing from the county more and more is, we're still recommending 6 feet. The science supports 6 feet, but there are a lot of factors for you to consider, and it's for you to weigh those risks and benefits. And if you make that judgment call of going below 6 feet, that's okay. But there's a lot of things to consider in doing that.
Thank you. That was way more than I needed. You had me good. As soon as you said, no, nobody other than students with disabilities do we have to worry about FAPE. So I appreciate that. Thank you. That has been bothering me for quite some time, and you answered it perfectly. Thank you very much.
Judy, can I pop in on one more thing with what you said? So I don't look, maybe I have a different perspective. I don't look at it as though our online is inferior in any way, but how I look at it, and the parents that I've been seeing from both sides of it, that, oh, my kid's doing great in online, we love it. It's exactly how they can learn. But the other side of it are those kids whose parents know that them not learning as well unless they're front and center with somebody. That's where I look at it. It's just a different perspective.
No, I agree with you. My daughter's doing just fine on online. What I'm saying is if there was somebody who felt that their child was doing better in hybrid, but now they can't send them in hybrid because they're going less than the 6 feet, then their perception is it's an inferior mode and therefore we were denying them FAPE. But like I said, the free and appropriate public education, which Kyle had explained very well to me is not the case. We're not liable for that, which is the thing that's been bothering me for a while. So I really appreciate that very thorough explanation that Kyle gave.
He is good at that. Anyone else? Oh, Steve, go ahead.
I actually do. So Kyle, were any of these same legal risks brought up in one of your other districts? I noticed North Penn is going full 5-day. Did they have any talks about the legal risks of opening full time, so on and so forth, that you would advise them that we're missing? I just know, being that their size is like 20 times ours, just wondering.
Sure. So obviously, I have a certain duties of confidentiality with every school district that I work with, but information that I could share that is certainly public information is
public
that
side, yeah.
that particular school district is still maintaining a 6 foot of distance, at least that's my understanding, and part of that relates to the number of students who are choosing virtual. So if you are in a district where a very high percentage of students are electing a virtual option, it may be possible to have the students who are hybrid come in every day. There are, and honestly, there is a wide variety, and Dr. Roach could speak to this. He's in communication with all of the other superintendents. There are a variety of districts doing different things. And so I think that there are districts that are moving to being open 4 days or 5 days that are maintaining the 6 foot distance, and doing that either through, primarily through a smaller number of students coming in, that they have a higher percentage of students doing virtual than honestly than we have currently. There are other districts that are opening up 4 or 5 days a week that are going below the 6 foot distance and doing it that way. So, I think that there are different things happening in different places.
Yeah, I was going to chime in, Stephen, real quick. From according to Dr. Dietrich, the number of students that are attending in person dropped so low, almost less than 50% in most buildings, so where they were able to then kind of crunch the numbers and say if that's going to maintain. They've taken an approach similar to what we have done secondary. They did in all of their classrooms, which is that kind of live streaming, Zooming nonstop. So all of their classes are happening virtual as well as online as well as in person. With I think a little finessing there, that's what Dr. Dietrich had shared, that they were moving to that. I'm not aware of anyone else that's able to do the 6 foot all in. Other than that, I think everyone else was under. But I think it gets close for secondary schools. I mean, he would say that on a certain day, there was less than 30% of the staff there. He said it was desolate in the high school, because that's just what the model is. And you saw from our numbers how they range from elementary all the way to high school, around 55%. So it definitely helps that situation.
Okay, maybe that's something we could bring up, as you were saying, something to bring up for more decision making is maybe where percentages have changed, because I know you guys had presented to us before that our percentages were maybe in the mid 60s for, I think, the middle level, and maybe in the low 70s for the high school level, and maybe we could see how those changed.
We showed those to you tonight. If you want, I can pull that up again real quick for the different buildings.
Yeah, maybe I missed that part.
I'll show it to you real quick. So this was Hereford. 75% of the students are in person right now, with the numbers there. and Marlboro at
On my
70.
phone, your picture was covering it. That's why I didn't see it. Sorry. I had
Okay,
to move
no
it.
worries. Yep. So Hereford was at 76% is already in person in some way, 4 days or blue and gold. 76% at Marlboro. 75 or 76% at the 4-5, and then it dips down a little bit here with 66% at middle, and then finally 57% at the high school. So that is a trend that we're seeing, we're hearing about across the county in terms of as you go higher in the grades, that it seems to be a little less in person. That's not to say when you say that you're going to be coming in 4 or 5 days that, well, now my best friend that has the opposite alpha letter than me, that may be a motivating factor. I mean, everyone has their own factor, which is why I was saying the numbers we showed you were based upon the current enrollment in the last declaration. And so that's an important piece.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Gary?
Yeah, I just had 2 quick comments. One, I just feel it's an absolute cop-out by the county and the state and the federal government. I mean, we're people from the community to help run our school district with degrees in business, chemistry, education. We're not qualified to do industrial hygiene and epidemiology to do these kind of things. It's really, it should be from the professionals as to what to do. I mean, we wouldn't say how to treat a child with cancer. It's really a cop-out in my opinion. The second thing is, these are all really good discussions. One of the best ways to get to where we need to be is to have a very reduced rate. And, it's surprising to me, we're one of the most spread out districts, but yet our per capita is a little bit higher in a rate per 100,000. So really it stresses to me that the way we do this, we can't rely on Washington or the county or, even Harrisburg. We need to make sure we do things ourselves, really take a good social distancing, mask wearing, washing our hands. We have to really take ownership of that ourselves to get the cases down enough so that the 6 foot becomes irrelevant when the cases are near zero. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in a never ending, the same as we are today. So
That was why I wanted to see what the actual numbers are, because I think it's really, really low. And like Dr. Farina said, we might have 4 people in one town, but it could be just one family because of the contact. Anybody else?
The only reason I bring those items up though is the last time we had any talk about an in-person instructional model, a full in-person, was probably back in October, when the numbers were very low, and we're about that 7-day trend area now. And obviously there's many more mitigation efforts that we're doing now that maybe we can reduce numbers further. That's something I definitely want to look at.
Yeah, me too. Anybody else? I don't see any hands up. All right, shall we move on to our next presentation, which is an update and progress on the program review and consideration for implementation of full-day kindergarten with Dr. Farina and Mrs. Bast.
Well, thank you so very much. Can everybody see that? Am I sharing the correct screen? Okay, perfect. Dr. Farina and I have worked on this presentation with several contributors. And so we thank Doug and Sandy for all of their assistance in getting this prepared for today. About a year ago, we were asked to consider, could we do full day K and what might that look like? And so this really represents the answer to that question, the charge that we had to investigate the opportunity for full day K at Upper Perkiomen School District. I do have to say that the work that's been done by K teachers, some reading specialists, some special area teachers has been tremendous in the midst of pandemic schooling. They've done a tremendous job of investigating materials, of writing curriculum, of really researching and talking on their own to districts that have been doing this in addition to the work that we've done together. So we're going to run through some slides here. It's a very short presentation, and I said to the K teachers earlier this week, I said, I feel like that will minimize the work that you've done. And by no means do we mean to do that. It's tremendous, the work that everyone has put in to put this together. But we did want to give you briefly and concisely what you've asked for. So no, we have much praise for them, and we're very appreciative of the work they'll continue to do. In terms of curriculum, materials, and resources, we have had a team of writers writing curriculum. We've investigated resources for curriculum, instruction, and assessment. We have compiled lists of, if we open new classrooms, here are the things we need to outfit them. And so you see some of that reflected in this total cost at the bottom of the slide. But additionally, there will be some new resources and materials that we would like to bring forward as a part of the full day K program. We will, again, as I said, order things to equip new classrooms with the same things that are in current classrooms. And so we do want to have that equity between every classroom in Marlborough, every classroom in Hereford, and that equity between buildings. And so we'll be looking to do that. One of the other projects that the group is just beginning to dive a little bit more deeply into is a standards-based report card. With the opportunity to do full day K, it's an opportunity with a new curriculum to really align that in a standards-based way, to communicate to families exactly where their child is in relation to the standards. And so that's some work that will begin now and will certainly continue over the summertime. So when we look at the cost for all of these curriculum materials and resources, some of this $75,000 is a one-time cost to outfit new classrooms, and some of that will be recurring. And we have that kind of broken out in a later slide. So one of the considerations for the board in terms of full day K is curriculum materials and resources, and we have a budget number there for you. The other part, the other of many parts, is personnel. Currently looking at our numbers, it's really hard to project whether we will need 3 or 4 classroom teachers to take us from half day to full day K. We also got very creative with how we could bring another special to the kindergarten students without having to hire a new art, PE, library, music, and flight teacher to cover all of those. We're really looking at what can we do to target K so that they have an additional special area, and so that all of our teachers maintain their prep time through special area classes. And that's how we've been doing that. So looking at 3 to 4 classroom teachers and 2 special area teachers, the projected cost through personnel, this would be a recurring cost, is just under $550,000. Of course, that would go down if we only end up needing 3. That's the maximum that we would see there. And so I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Farina, who's been working on the facility and transportation end and other such items. And so I'll toss the baton.
Thank you, Mrs. Bast. So transportation is always a factor. As the board knows, we talk about transportation a lot. One of the considerations with adopting transportation adopting full day K is transportation. And so there are some moving parts with transportation in that we currently have 9 midday kindergarten runs, which we expend about $450 a day for those runs. So if we transition to full day K, we would obviously eliminate those midday runs. However, we would likely have to increase our fleet by 2 buses, which is $300 a day. So ultimately you're looking at $150 a day addition, which would be around $27,000 additional in our transportation costs to bring all of our kindergarten students to and from school each day. And so, you know, you're looking that's around $30,000 a year for transportation to add those 2 buses. If we think about facilities, facilities was, Mrs. Bass, could you, thank you. We have vetted much of this information through our committee structure, which has been very, very helpful. And Mrs. Bass said it was a year. I can tell you that I think it's been about 3 years that we've talked about full day K and the implementation of full day kindergarten. And so this year, last year and this year has been very refreshing to vet this process through our committees. And one of the committees that has taken a good look is our facilities committee. And if the intention and the purpose of facilities picking up full day K may have not made sense at the beginning, but truthfully, it was about equity and the exploration of equity between Marlborough and Hereford. Marlborough is a newer building. It has storage elements and toilet rooms for students in the primary grades, and just has some of those accessibility issues that Hereford did not possess just simply because of age. And so we did a comprehensive study. We pulled in an architect with our director of facilities under the direction of the facilities committee. And we looked at several options, but because of the nature of the building at Hereford, the facilities committee determined that that building may need attention in the long term anyway. So we looked at really what type of essential facilities improvement Hereford would need. And on Tuesday night, we went through those. You can see them. I've listed them there. But truthfully, it's about refreshing and retrofitting that environment, the kindergarten pod at Hereford to be a little more appropriate. And then the other addition to that would be furniture and casework. Due to the nature of the building structure at Hereford, the walls are not real walls. I'm sorry to say, the green and the mustard yellow, they are not load bearing. And so it really created limitations in our capacity to add storage. So we worked with Corbett to identify 3 potential furniture and casework sequences for the Hereford classrooms, 6 classrooms for common spaces at Hereford that we would be looking to provide new furniture and storage for. And we went down there and as I said in facilities, none of them really fit the bill. So what we asked, each of them had some really unique elements, and under, sort of the direction of Mrs. Zavidel, who is very much in touch with the kindergarten team, we asked Corbett to come back and create sort of renderings, and these are good, better, best, just like we did in our other buildings. But basically student seating, teacher seating, soft seating, and casework and storage. And so what we asked them to do is bring back 3 renderings of each of those packages. And Mrs. Savidel would work with the kindergarten team at Hereford to identify which one they believe is most suitable. We heard from Mrs. Culp the other day that in facilities that storage, please, whatever you do, give us storage. And so, we hear you, but we are going to ask them to make some decisions. And so I added this as a link just so you can see the kind of flexible seating and the kind of very unique environment that kindergarten calls for. And so the cost for furniture and casework, what we did is the casework is very expensive. And so to do those 6 classrooms and 4 common spaces, it will cost around $250,000. Primarily, as I said, because the walls are not load bearing. We cannot secure anything safely to the wall. So they have to do some fitting in order to secure all kinds of storage to the floor. And so there's some work there. We also understand that we don't want to create a disparity between Hereford and Marlborough by adding furniture and casework at Hereford. There is some unique furniture that may be necessary, and we will ask both kindergarten teams to identify. The new curriculum that's being proposed involves a very diverse range of activities for students at kindergarten level. And we want to make sure teachers have those supplies in both buildings. And so, we don't want to forget that as we move and make the recommendation to move to full day K, that there are some unique needs that both buildings possess outside of just the physical structure of the classrooms. And so in totality, that furniture, facilities and furniture budget would look around $379,000. So if we fast forward, and I think the question, it came up, I know in facilities, but several years ago, we said, this isn't just about 4 teachers. I believed it was, can't we just add 4 teachers? Well, the answer is no. And we tried to show you why. The furniture and casework, that budget and facilities budget can be a capital expenditure. It's a one-time expense. However, the board needs to be aware that personnel and in all likelihood, some type of curriculum and transportation are reoccurring costs. And so while this could be, the cost is just, a little over $1 million for the first year implementation of kindergarten. However, that second line item is something that the board will commit to over a long term. And we know personnel costs are exponential. So they're never the same. And so as we move and if we adopt personnel, we're committing to the long-term commitment of those funds for full day K. And so, we just need to, we said this is an expensive venture. We absolutely believe it's a worthwhile venture. We just want the board to know that this is not a one-time expense. Some of it could be, but all in all, it is a lifetime expense of the program. So the reason we bring it to you tonight is because, as you all know, kindergarten registration actually usually begins now. We actually would have already published in the newspaper. We would have set up our registration days. However, Mrs. Bast and myself and the team, we wanted to make sure parents were really sure about what they were registering for. And so we wanted to understand the board's appetite for this level of commitment. We know the budget does not get approved, till much later in this school year. And we would need, we would already have to be moving in the direction of full day K now this spring. And that would be prior to budget approval, which I think, if I asked Mrs. Castle and even myself, I was not comfortable making that move. And so just so you know, hiring personnel, we have to post, we have to interview, and we would have to do board approval. Generally, that would happen in July because we want to secure somebody for the first day of school. We would love to secure people well before that because we want to get them saturated in our kindergarten teams, familiar with our curriculum, familiar with our facilities, and be available for families and kids before the first day of school. Registration, I just want everyone to know our online registration is currently up and available. People are registering. We promise you that. I think there could be a difference in the number of registrants. Many of our families may register who may choose to go somewhere else to a full day program. They may register if it's full day. And then we also, transitioning to full day K, we believe very strongly that we need to have information nights. We need to start educating our families. A full day program, and I think our full day teachers would tell you, is exhausting for little people. And so families often want to know, what is that going to look like? It's the little thing. What happens at lunch and recess and the bus? And there's so many things that I think that we need to educate parents on around what full day K looks like. And so, when we started this venture and the board approved the motion to move forward with the investigation, this is sort of the very simplistic, this is our, recommendation. These are the figures that surround that recommendation. And now we're at the point where, we would have to decide whether we were moving forward. And Kim and I were happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. And being on a couple of those, well, all of those meetings ahead of this, I just wasn't sure what the staff amount was, but obviously that's a recurring cost. I just want to say that facilities was fine with, we were good to go. And I don't think the materials and all the curriculum wise, that's not too terribly expensive. Again, it's the staff, and and we're not sure yet because we won't know how many kids are coming, how many teachers we need. So anybody else want to make go ahead.
I'll just say, and that is a great point, because it is dependent on enrollment.
Yeah.
Right. So, depending on, and I think we're running simultaneously with a pandemic. And so, it's been a difficult I'm actually very happy with the progress the team made during this adverse time. However, the reality is we're not sure what registration will look like. And so, our personnel is dependent on enrollment. And so there could be a minus in that if we don't see as many registrants as we anticipate.
Yep, I agree. Anyone have any questions? Steve, I see your.
I don't have a question. Actually, I have a comment. More so that I appreciate absolutely all the work you guys have done on this, from previously being on a curriculum and instruction. I mean, from seeing the data, definitely this is needed. And I mean, even our elementary teachers speaking about how this would truly impact the teachings of children. And I really want to also reach out and thank James for really helping us get this initiative going and getting everyone together on it. I mean, sad to say you can't see it through, but it's all in thought.
Very good point. Peg, I saw you had your hand up.
Yes, just a clarification from Mrs. Bast.
Yes.
The other night at the curriculum meeting, I just want to make sure I wasn't hearing things. So you'll help me realize that. I thought I heard you mention that there's a likely potential that kindergarten will be mandatory through the state.
Yeah, the state
I
is,
hear that right?
you did. The state is seriously considering mandating full day K. I think that certainly that will be put on hold with everything that's gone on with the pandemic. But prior to that, around this time last year, we were really hearing some strong signaling that that would be the direction they were heading in.
So we're headed in that direction anyway. We're just ahead of it. So yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sometimes it's better to have it on our terms instead of anyone else's terms.
Yeah, agreed.
I forget who else had their hand up. Carrie had his hand up, and then I'll go to.
Yeah, I would just say, I think it's been about 3 years and James did start the conversation and he'll still see it through, from wherever. So, and the other thing I would just say is, I remember the first numbers that we saw was about 500K to 600K. So you're within 10% of what you thought. I know there's a lot of details in the plans. But it's not out of the realm of what we thought. And for perspective, that's, I think, 1% or less of our overall budget. So, it's within a reasonable realm for the return that you get with it. So that's just my comment.
Thanks, Carrie. Go ahead, Keith.
It's been kicked around for almost 20 years now. We need to get it done. So let's move forward.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a wonderful idea. I think it'd be a wonderful thing to offer to our students. And dude, kudos to Steve and Carrie for giving a shout out to James, because this meant a lot to him. And I think this is part of his legacy, and I think that's really cool to be a neat way to honor him, speaking as not only a board member with him and a scout dad with him, but also as his friend. I think that would be sweet. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, I think it's about time we get it done. Dana, go ahead.
It's an expensive proposition, but it's overdue. And thank you, James.
I also want to point out that what we didn't mention is, just to say this out loud, when we do full day K, that is just going to enhance the performance of everyone from the beginning to the end. And I think I can speak for all of us that we all get it, that we need to do that. And it's really important.
And I'll just say thank you on behalf of the teachers. They're so excited at the prospect. They've invested a great deal of time, energy, and effort, and honestly cannot wait. They're thrilled to have their kids 4 days a week right now and are very excited about the possibility. So I thank them, and I thank you on their behalf if what I'm hearing sounds right.
Sure thing. Go ahead, Steve.
One point, the only question I didn't think about asking is, now, since there is space in the building to move to a full day K, would if say we were to move into full, still be in a virtual environment, virtual hybrid environment come fall, would full day K have enough spacing to be in person?
It would really depend on the numbers. That's the best I can give you right now. I
That's
wish.
fair. I mean, we're
Yeah.
still, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And if we looked at the K numbers right now, I might be able to project, Dr. Roach. I don't know if I have that. I don't know if you even had that on the slide because there are 4 days right now. It would really just depend on those numbers. I mean, we want to keep the class sizes low as we normally do in kindergarten, but within our policy numbers. But it's so hard to say. One of the reasons we did half day this year for everyone was so we could get them in front of us as much as possible, 4 days a week for that, continuity. But we're hoping full day everybody next year and everybody fits and we can pull it off.
That is definitely a glass half full thought. Anyone else? Do we need more time to think about this, or do we say pull the trigger and go for it?
Make a motion to approve full day kindergarten.
Second.
I don't know if we can necessarily do it like that, but
I might jump out of my shoes to make that motion.
No, I think, how about this? I would like to make an amendment to today's meeting agenda to add a motion to approve full day kindergarten.
If we do that, do we need to do public comment and all that kind of stuff?
Madam President, there is actually already a public comment on the agenda because there are personnel items to be voted on. So certainly in your role, if you normally at our action meetings, there's a vote on the agenda, but we typically don't have that at the work session. If you would like to add an item for approval of the administration to move forward with the implementation of full day kindergarten, if you'd like to have that added as under the action items section of the agenda, if you just announce that now or any time before public comment, that would certainly be something the board could vote on this evening.
Well, that would be my pleasure. Thank you. It would be my pleasure to add that under action items.
Just make sure that as you head as the commitment that we have to be eyes wide open as the numbers that you just saw, budget implications, tax increases, all those types of things need to be thought of that conversation. Because I'm assuming that the thought is to not at the sacrifice of other things. Obviously, we'll be as budgetly, fiscally as possible as we go through the process, but it needs to be said, and not as the downer here, as the reality piece that that would be a part of that conversation moving forward. But we'll obviously sharpen our pencils as best we can, but that's definitely have to say part of that.
Well, as head of the finance committee, I still am good with that.
Alan, are you saying that we should rescind Sandy's resignation, her retirement?
No, I didn't say that. I'm not even going to joke in that area because Sandy and I are the only two in this building right now.
Oh, that's right. Whoops.
She will find you.
And that COVID test you're going to get is not going to be pretty here. Like, okay. Well, now that we've added that as an action item, I would like to, and does anyone have any more comments? Otherwise, I'd like to move on to our spring athletics discussion. Okay, seeing no hands up, I will move us on to spring athletics discussion and review of the revised health and safety plan. And that would be Mr. Kurzweg and Dr. Carpenter. And hello and thank you. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Dr. Roach, are you going to put the PowerPoint?
I can share it. Yep, I can happily share it. Just let me know. Mr. Kurzweg, every time you want me to change, just go beep, and then I'll know to change the.
You got it.
All right, thanks.
Good evening. Before Dr. Carpenter and I speak about our spring sports plan, I'd like to update everyone with our winter sports success. This winter, we had 170 athletes participate in our winter sports programs. In addition, we had athletes have individual success, and some of them are still competing. We had 2 boys and 4 girls qualify for the District 1 swimming championships this weekend. We also had 6 wrestlers qualify for the District 1 wrestling championship last weekend, and 2 of those athletes, Matt Milkowicz and Joey Carpenter, have both qualified for the regional wrestling tournament as being held this weekend at Council Rock North. We also had some team success. Our boys swim team went undefeated in their meet schedule, and we had 19 girls come out for our new indoor track team. As everyone is aware, back in November, the Department of Health mandated masks be worn at all times, which included while participating in athletics. Unless there's an update to that mandate, all of our coaches and student athletes will wear masks at all times again this spring. Beep. Pioneer Athletic Conference has been meeting weekly this year, and spring sports has been a big topic of discussion over the last couple of months. As we did in the fall and the winter, we decided to delay the start of the spring season. Our high school teams will start mandatory practices on March 22nd, with our middle school teams starting on March 29th. In addition to the delay, it was decided that we would play league-only schedules as we did in the fall and the winter, so that we could stay within our packed bubble for the spring season. The league will continue to use the protocols for athlete screenings, officials, event workers, and media that have been in place the last 2 seasons. Our spring sports health and safety plan is a combination of both our fall and our winter plans. This spring, we will continue to do what has been successful for us the previous 2 seasons. All of our coaches and student athletes will continue to be screened upon arriving on campus. While we only permitted water polo to practice inside during the fall, we obviously had no choice but to allow winter teams to practice inside. With all the bad weather we traditionally have in the spring, we felt it was crucial to allow our indoor practices to take place when we had inclement weather. We will use the indoor protocols that we had in place this winter and roll them over into the spring season. Our gym time may be limited because we will not be sharing facilities, and we will have a gap between practice times so our athletes are not bumping into each other when arriving or leaving practices. This winter, we used locker rooms as sparingly as we could. However, when students returned to school, there was a need to provide them somewhere to change. We will continue to encourage our athletes to come to school ready for practice and games, but if there are students who need to use the locker rooms to change, our coaches will create groups or pods so that the same students are changing together each day while staying under the allotted occupancy numbers. We were hoping we would have our PIAA spring return to play guidelines by now, but we were told this week that we won't receive them until at least March 1st. Once we have those guidelines, we'll update our health and safety plan with those additions like we did in our winter plan. We're also very excited to get our teams back outside, and with lacrosse being the only sport that will have somewhat contact, we are hopeful to have a very successful spring season. After speaking with St. Luke's, here are some of the guidelines that we'll have in place for our spring sports. We will continue to encourage all our coaches and student athletes to stay at least 6 feet apart at all times when possible. Boys tennis, we'll use the same type of protocols we had in place for the fall girls season. One of those, athletes will mark their tennis balls and only serve and pick up those designated tennis balls. Girls lacrosse will follow a lot of the same guidelines that field hockey used in the fall. One of those guidelines will be having extra game balls located around the field for the athletes to use during games. All the equipment will be sanitized after use, and goalkeeper equipment and sticks will not be shared. With track and field consisting of a lot of individual events, our student athletes will be able to spread out across all our facilities. When using equipment such as the discus and shot puts, if those items need to be shared, they will all be sanitized before and after each use. We're still having discussions as a league how to figure out how to run track meets this spring. With mitigation concerns, we're discussing many options, such as running the boys and girls meets on different days and potentially having to limit the amount of athletes each school could send to meets. In baseball and softball, all equipment will be sanitized before and after each use. We're fortunate that a lot of our athletes at both levels have their own bats and helmets. If a student does not have their own helmet, coaches will assign one to them for the season. There will be no licking of fingers and no sunflower seeds permitted this spring. With the size of most dugouts, it will be difficult to social distance inside them at all times. We will see if the PIAA gives any guidance to the possibility of extending the dugout area down the foul line if it can be safely done to allow our athletes to spread out. This time, Dr. Carpenter is going to talk a little bit about the antigen testing.
Thank you, Mr. Kurzweg. Also, before I continue on here, as a high school principal, I really appreciate the discussion about full day kindergarten. That's very exciting. So thank you. I appreciate that a lot. As Dr. Farina mentioned earlier tonight, I was listening, even though I wasn't on screen, Dr. Farina, but I heard you, say earlier that we did not have in the fall and the winter the opportunity to have antigen testing. So I think this is huge. This is a huge potentially new addition for us that can help with detecting COVID-19 and also mitigating the spread of COVID-19. So it's our recommendation that all our spring student athletes participate in this program. So we're willing to create a weekly testing routine for all our spring student athletes. So it's just a way to detect, again, asymptomatic and COVID-19 antigens and potentially stop the spread amongst our athletes while protecting, the most important thing, and that's in-person instruction for our students academically. We will continue with the NFHS live streaming. Unfortunately, in the spring, we only have the cameras in Keeney and Tribe stadiums. So we will brainstorm with our baseball and softball coaches to talk about, ways to show that. But hopefully we can have parents on campus outside to watch baseball games and softball games and to help with the viewing of the games there. So we'll continue with that. And then there will be a motion on the March 11th board meeting agenda for you to vote on. Here are some considerations for you. Officially, if it is school board approved, we would start, as Bobby said, on March 22nd, which is the official start, as the league has pushed that back. And then we could have also for high school sports, a week of voluntary workouts starting March 15th. So that concludes our presentation.
Thanks, guys. Any questions from the board? Peg.
Just real quick, Mr. Kurzweig, what's your method of checking in with the coaches and the teams? Are you doing it daily, weekly, face-to-face, Zoom meetings? What does that look like?
Yeah, so what our plan is pre-season is we will have a mandatory meeting probably the week of in 2 weeks. That'll be basically run by St. Luke's, the same thing we've done in the fall and the winter, that will go over all our COVID-19 protocols and policies and procedures. The following week, the week the 15th, we'll have our normal spring coaches meeting. Both of those will be done with Zoom. And through the winter season, I met with coaches throughout the season face-to-face. We did some Zoom meetings with our head coaches halfway through the season to see how things were going and to update some information. We're also emailing constantly throughout the season. So I feel it went very well this winter with, the face-to-face, the combination of face-to-face Zoom meetings and emails.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, Judy, go ahead.
Okay, so I just have one silly question. I remember seeing it in the fall and I just saw it again. What is with the sunflower seeds? Why do we specifically have in our health and safety plan, no sunflower seeds allowed?
Yeah, and believe me, Mrs. McGinnis, that was a tough one for me because I'm a sunflower guy come baseball season. But the idea of that is the same reason for spitting, where when you're spitting sunflower seeds out, that the saliva is going, that could potentially pass the virus. That was something that we've seen back going.
I'm sorry. I understand that. It's just, so is sunflower seeds something that is like particular to baseball or something?
Yeah, baseball and softball players are very big on sunflower seeds.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
I never knew that. And I was like, why do we need to specify that nobody can have sunflower seeds in our health and safety plan? But
It's a great alternative to chewing tobacco.
Exactly.
oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I have two girls, none of which play those particular sports, so I never knew that was a thing. Thank you.
That's a good question. Anybody else? No? Okay, so I guess we'll be ready to see that motion on March 11th and go from there. Thank you guys for the nice presentation.
Thank you very much.
As with the previous conversation, if there's anything the board needs additional, they need additional information, an idea comes, you need further clarification, please let us know. We can get that to you prior to that. That way you have everything you need and prior to that conversation.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your time.
Sure. So that moves us on to public comments on agenda items. Do we have any public comments on the agenda items?
We did have a public comment submitted by Sierra Turner. Sierra, if you're there, can you raise your hand?
And make sure you say your town, please.
I don't see Sierra raising her hand. I'll look for her.
Okay.
We do have a hand raised. Jean Doloff. Just remember Township of Residents first and last name, please.
Thank you very much. Gene Dolph, Upper Hanover Township, a father of 4 that have gone through the district, a grandfather of 2 that have gone through, and 2 more that are going to go through. So I have skin in the game. My thoughts to the both administration and board. I know this is very difficult, this whole COVID thing. I'm coming from this perspective of 5-day in person, and for those of you who want to go virtual, so be it. But our kids are absolutely suffering emotionally and academically. I've been on calls with the district, and I know how hard it's been for the district to try to figure out virtual and in person at the same time. So I'm an advocate of let's get it done and move on to in person. And the data from CDC, and I'll ask the board and administration to look up the Brown University study on the impact of kids and teachers with COVID. Very robust study. There is not a problem for us going back full time. And I'm very appreciative of the teacher union representative coming on, because he made it very clear, it's not about the kids, it's about the teachers. And that's unfortunate. We've got great teachers in this district, but the union is not representing them well, and they should be called out. They're bullies, what they're expecting, and we need to be back in school. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean.
Thank you, Jean.
Do we have any other hands raised, Andrea?
We do. I can't read it, but I think it's Courtney. I'm sorry if I did not get your name correct.
It's okay.
Please give us your first and last name and township. I'm very sorry.
No worries. My name is Courtney Diaversa, and I'm in Pennsburg Borough. I'm a parent of an incoming kindergarten student next year and an educator in a neighboring district. And I am so excited that you're considering implementing full day kindergarten. It was one of the big draws when we moved here last year, as our district that we were in wasn't even considering it. And now with the pandemic, these youngest learners, they need that extra time. And I love and I thank you guys for considering that. I wanted to thank you guys for investing the time and the resources and supporting this endeavor. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Courtney.
We have Jen O'Hara. Hi, Jen, are you there?
Hello, it's Anthony O'Hara.
Oh, Anthony.
Upper Hanover.
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on Jean Doloff's comments. I thought they were great. And along with the Brown study, there are several others out there now showing that it is safe to go back to in school education full time, 4 days, 5 days, whatever you may choose. Back in October, I asked a question: what made Upper Perk different from every surrounding district? And here we are 4 months later, and I have the same question. Do our teachers union reps discuss anything with teachers from the surrounding districts? The biggest schools around us are all back at least 4 days a week. Some are 5. I know Penn Ridge is, they have one of my friends teaches there. He has 29 kids in the class. They haven't missed a day of school. We seem to act like we are our own little island of Upper Perk. We're still going off what we went off of in the summer. Most schools around us are back at least 4 days, or they're planning on going back. Southern Lehigh is going back on Monday to 4 days. I just feel like we need more communication with the districts around us. I know the administration back in October said that you do talk with the other superintendents and other boards, but I'm not sure if our union reps are doing that, because we seem to be stuck in it is very unsafe for the teachers to be in school, when the studies are showing that it's not that unsafe, and the school districts that surround us seem to be doing a good job with going back full time. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
There are no hands up.
Okay, and we circled back. We couldn't find Sierra Turner. Okay.
Sierra.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, I think we're going to move on then to our personnel. So
I make the motion to approve the personnel report as presented, and note that Keith Leamer stands out in this entire list.
Yeah, I'm off.
I'll second that.
okay. Any discussion? I know I can say that I've known Keith Leamer a really long time, ever since my kids went to Marlboro. And yes, sorely missed, and congratulations for the retirement. Keith, Dana, go ahead. Sorry.
I prepared a statement. It seems like a lifetime ago, but Keith and I were teammates on the Graber wiring team in the Upper Perk Adult Basketball League. I also got to witness firsthand Keith's coaching prowess when the high school baseball staff ran clinics for the Upper Perk Little League coaches. At Upper Perk, Keith had a unique position that gave him the opportunity to have an impact on 35 plus years of elementary school students as a physical education instructor, and not just a single class, but the entire student population. My kids were led in their morning stretch, and now my granddaughter has the privilege of having Mr. Leamer guide her phys ed progress. Not long ago, Keith was a very successful head coach of varsity football at Upper Perk. But before that, he had already won my admiration as a middle school head coach. His program went above and beyond anything I had ever seen. Witness a season summary highlight reel produced by Keith and his brother that rivaled any NFL film's production. Keith poured his heart and his soul into making sure that his players knew that they were involved in something special and that what they were doing truly mattered. Congratulations on a great career, and thank you for being a tremendous role model.
Thanks, Dana. That was perfect. Perfect. Anyone else? Mike, go ahead.
Ooh, me. Can I share something? Can I share my screen? Do I have that access? Do I have
Not
that
up to
ability?
me, but not up to me, but I'm sure somebody will let you do that.
Dr. Farina? Just let me know, because I have the share
It should be
screen.
open. It should be open for you, Mr. Elliott.
Okay, cool. All right. So I had the privilege a few times of seeing Mr. Leamer run the snowball fight over at Hereford, and to see him have the whole building, every single grade, working in unison like this was something special. See if it'll play. So just a cool little video. I mean, he was such an electric, energetic fella. He is totally going to be missed. Thank you, Keith, for not only befriending me and making me feel very welcome all the time, but also just for doing such an amazing job, not just with my two boys, but with so many other kids in this district. He's a legend. And I don't know if that gym is named over at Hereford, but if it's not, I have an idea. So there you go. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody else? That was also very awesome. Good job. Anybody else? Up, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, Keith was one of my coaches. I mean, I've had him since seeing him on the massive TVs in our kindergarten classrooms doing morning workouts, all the way up to, 7th and 8th grade football, high school football, and so on and so forth. He was always a part of our lives, still is. I still run into him at Turkey Hill and Herbert. So, I mean, you see him everywhere, and he definitely has a presence, and he'll be truly missed.
Yeah, very good. Anybody else? I don't see any hands up. So we have a motion and a second to approve the personnel in its entirety. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, they're all approved.
Melanie, I'd like to make a motion to approve full day K on our action item list.
Second.
Second that.
Sorry, Judy.
Okay, okay, first a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just want to say again, I think this is, obviously we have to be, smart about, finances and stuff like that. But I think that the benefits of doing this are just incredible. I think we're going to see some wonderful repercussions of such a move. And I'll say it one more time, shout out to James, who really helped get this ball rolling. So thank you.
Anybody else? Perry?
Yeah, I would just say, assuming that we pass this, this will be one of the proudest achievements of my time on the school board, along with hiring many of our administrators that we have in place currently. This is going to be another one of the things that we do that'll really pay off in the long run for our district. So I'm really happy to see it on the agenda, even though I didn't get a chance to make the motion.
Definitely on our highlight reel, for
Yes.
sure. Okay, anybody else? Comments, anyone else? Seeing no hands up, we have a motion and a second to implement full day kindergarten starting September. Timeline's tight. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, get to it. Thank
Unanimous.
you, everyone. Unanimous. Excellent.
Good move.
Okay, well, we're going to follow that up with committee reports. First would be Special Ed and People Services. Ms. McGinnis.
Yes, thank you. So the Curriculum and Instruction and People Services Committee meeting was combined. I don't know, Dr. Drake, did you want to discuss anything in your update? Because I can defer to you if you would prefer to discuss it.
No, I just, again, for everybody who wasn't there, I think a lot of board members were there. We had a double header meeting and Judy ran both. So I'd be honored if you give an update on both.
Okay, just wanted to make sure first so that I didn't step all over your report. So we did meet on Monday, February 22nd, with the members of both Curriculum and Instruction and Pupil Services, as well as several of our other board members were in attendance. We had a rather lengthy update on the instructional programs at Upper Perk. So we started first at looking at special education, looking at how many students are currently in the building 4 days a week, how many what the changes have been like through the program. We started out, some of them were only coming in a couple days a week and moved to 4. We looked at the hybrid program, the UPEA program, Talked about some additional Wednesday afternoon support for our virtual students. And we talked about some future virtual cyber offerings. And one of the most exciting things that we heard about were the summer programming updates. If you aren't familiar with that, I highly recommend you go back and listen to the end of that meeting, because Dr. Farina and her staff have some wonderful ideas for summer that are going to be funded through a grant. And writing grants is a lot of work, but we have a wonderful grant writing staff, and they got us a grant that's going to allow us to offer some extras. We always have the ESY, the extended school year, but some extra programming for our students to try and make up for some of the, the lost instruction, potential lost instruction over the school year. We also got a sneak peek of the presentation for the full day kindergarten at that meeting. We did find out that we will be getting a presentation in March on some changes to the policy for class rank policy and procedures. But even if we do revise that policy, it wouldn't go into effect until 2024. So there was one other item on our agenda, if you happen to have looked at it, that but the meeting had gone on several hours at that point. So we moved MTSS update overview and work ahead to our March 22nd. March 22nd? Or 20, yes, March 22nd pupil services and special ed meeting. Any questions regarding that? I think everybody here was on that committee meeting, except for me.
It was nice to see that I think there were 44 people on at one time, and that was great for a committee meeting.
It was. We did have a lot of teachers who came, and they gave us, I think, as I recall, Mr. Elliott already mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, that they gave us a lot of insight into the collaboration and team meetings and such that they do on Wednesdays. Kind of gave us an idea about what goes on Wednesdays, besides the deep clean of all our buildings that we all think about on Wednesdays. So that was kind of nice, because it's great to hear from our teachers, and we're always happy to see them. So, and that's the end of my committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up we have, so we'll skip over curriculum and instruction since Judy just did for both, and we'll move on to extracurricular. Ms. Pennypacker.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. The extracurricular committee met on February 18th, last Thursday. The invited guests for the meeting were Amy Lychuk, high school student council advisor, Kathleen Rambo and Cheryl Stotzenberg, middle school student council co-advisors. In addition, we were treated with the attendance of several students from the high school and middle school student councils. Ms. Lychuk, a 25-year veteran at Upper Perk, shared a slide presentation highlighting the Upper Perk High School Student Council, which is open to all students. And the goal is to include all students. The high school student council has 100 plus students participating over the 4 grade levels. Ms. Lychuk shared a long list of activities that the group has participated in over the years, a list of many donations to the school and community, and the work in collaboration with other clubs and activities. Ms. Rambo and Ms. Stotzenberg, in their second year as co-advisors of the middle school student council, shared a slide presentation highlighting the activities of the middle school student council. The group's initial focus is on kindness, with, quote, be the kind of person who makes a difference, end quote, as their mission. Some of the activities they highlighted included Socktoberfest, where they collected over 500 pairs of socks that were donated locally, the Pink Out fundraiser for breast cancer awareness, Unity Day, where they collected 1,000 kind messages in the school that were shared with one another. Turkey Trot, Veterans Day honoring UPSD alumni, veterans, just to name a few. The committee also requested the advisors for both groups to review board policy number 228, student government, to share their thoughts, ideas, and opinions regarding the policy in order to assist the policy committee with any potential updates or revisions of the policy. The committee was truly impressed with the organization and operation of our student council organizations. The number of events the groups organize and participate in is truly inspiring, and the level at which these groups contribute to the school community is phenomenal. The committee thanks and appreciates the work and dedication that Ms. Lychuk, Ms. Rambo, and Ms. Stotzenberg devote to the students who participate in these organizations. The vehicle that the student council organizations provide to students to engage in student government activities and servant leadership to the school community is precisely what it's all about. And I would also add that it's our hope when our board meetings go live face-to-face with audience that we invite the student council to one of our meetings to have them present to the full board, because it is truly amazing what they do. Very impressive. Also, Mr. Kurzweg, District Athletic Director, engaged the committee in a discussion on the possibility of adding an NFHS camera system to the pool area at a cost of $5,000. There are NFHS cameras currently in the high school gymnasium, Keeney Stadium, and Tribe Stadium. For the 2020-2021 school year, the district did purchase a membership for free home game access for our fans and supporters. And there was discussion on the possibility of the options moving forward in order to further support the district's athletics program. And the NFHS network system can also be used for other school events such as graduation. The next extracurricular committee meeting is scheduled for March 18th at 6 o'clock, and our anticipated invited guests will be from the drama club and speech debate advisors, perhaps some students. We'll have to see. This concludes the extracurricular committee report. Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham.
Well, thank you, Ms. Pennypacker. That was a good meeting. That was a lot of, it's really good. They're fun meetings because there's things you don't even know about. And now we know. Anybody have any questions? If not, I'll move on to facilities, which is my committee. We met February 23rd as, hang on. I completely unmute myself here. We talked about full day kindergarten, which you saw the rest of that here today, and which we are proudly going to have now. We talked about the high school varsity softball drainage improvement options. We had asked for some exploration on actually relocating the girls softball field, but that had a price tag of about $800,000. That was not a good idea. So what we did recommend is to fix the drainage, and the cost of that was about $223,000. So that would be what the facilities committee would be recommending. We talked about, we had a kickoff yesterday of our Giza Phase 1A project that we approved, I guess, last month. And that was just to go over the fine tuning of everything. So the projects are getting started. The chiller for the high school should be coming soon. And we'll be working, they're working on Phase 1B. Sorry, my notes are all over the place here. We're working on Phase 1B, and some of those items are out for quote through Noresco. We talked about the cistern at the high school sinkhole, but since all the snow, we haven't had time and you can't get to it, to open it back up and fill it back in. We recommended one design for the Keeney Stadium signage, and you'll be seeing that soon. I believe their committee was still fundraising for it. In new business, we talked about a yearly or every 2-year police memorandum of understanding that we have. It's just a formality with the local police, the state police, Reading State Police, just to, give them all a heads up that they're going to come and help us if we need them. We also talked about a risk assessment, a Pennsylvania State Police risk and vulnerability assessment. There'll be a team coming, we're not sure when yet, to do a no-cost assessment to any of our vulnerabilities in our buildings. They'll be doing it at all of our buildings. So we'll have more to come on that later. We talked about the need for the high school track takeoff board replacement, and wasn't put in correctly to begin with. And we saw some pictures of it and it's kind of falling apart. So that would, the long jump and the triple jump, and I think it was approximately $11,000 to replace that and get that working right, because right now it's a trip hazard and it looks horrible and that needs to be replaced. So the facilities committee recommended that come through. We talked about that we're still working on, there was some hail damage to the air handlers at the new middle school, and we're still working on maybe getting some insurance money for that, but that was not looking too good so far. We talked about the 4th and 5th grade center and buses and cars, and I just want to remind everybody to be very safe there. And no high school gym baskets yet, which Peg had asked for. We're getting there. And we talked about some track fencing gates. Our next meeting is March 18th at 7 p.m. That will be virtual. And that should conclude my report. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. All right. So now we'll move on to Finance Committee. And that's me. We met February 16th, a virtual meeting of finance. We talked about our charter school update. And right now we're about $1.4 million over our budget in for using cyber charters. I said that earlier today, that I'd love to see all those kids come back. We talked about the tax collection of the per capita tax, which we were working on a third party to do that. And we talked about the revenue and went over, which we'll be going over in more depth once we get to real budget talks, revenue and what the revenue would look like with a 0% millage increase all the way up to what we said we wouldn't go over, which would be the 3.7 millage increase, which is our Act 1 index. And our next meeting is March 15th at 6 p.m. Anybody have any questions? And seeing none, we will move on to Policy Committee. Ms. Pennepacker.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. The Policy Committee met this past Tuesday, the 23rd at 5:30 p.m. All committee members were present, as well as Mrs. Cunningham, Dr. Farina, Mrs. Castle, Dr. Roach, Mrs. Fisher, as well as several building administrators. The committee continues to meticulously move through the 200-level policies relative to pupils. The meeting was ultimately dedicated to an in-depth discussion around policy number 227, controlled substances paraphernalia. Conversation mainly revolved around the number of offenses that would occur before expulsion of a student may be recommended, supportive measures, and the informal hearing process. Dr. Farina and Mr. Summers will be reviewing the policy again and seek to rework some of the details in order to find appropriate middle ground language. We will continue to work through the process so that we are able to bring to the full board a policy that is appropriate and fair. The next policy that will require close attention by the committee and then eventually the full board is policy number 233, suspension and expulsion. I again kindly encourage the board to carefully review these and all policies as the committee works through them and eventually brings them to you for approval. At this time, I will defer to Dr. Farina and or Mr. Summers for any additional comments that I may have omitted. regarding policy 227 or others. Dr. Farina, Mr. Summers, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I believe your summary reflected exactly the nature of the dialogue. And, you know, Mr. Summers and I will continue to converse and present the committee with a recommendation for that language change.
Okay, thank you. The next policy committee meeting is scheduled for March 16th, beginning at 6 p.m. This concludes the policy committee report.
Thank you, Ms. Pennypacker. We'll move on to Western Montgomery Career and Technical Center. Steve.
Thank you very much. So the only the only things I have really to report are that couple things. One, Alan finally got to take his full tour of the Western Center. So that's great. Kids are getting ready for NOCD testing, which will happen in March, mid-March, I think March 15th and 16th. And from there, what'll happen is they'll get their scores back. They'll understand, you know, what they have to improve on or not, and be able to go on into the real world with their certifications. The only other things going on, Skills USA competition happened, and we haven't had a COVID case there, knock on wood, since the 16th. So that's good. Our weekly numbers have trended down. That's all. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Judy McGinnis and Montgomery County Intermediate Unit.
Thank you. The Montgomery County IU Board of Directors met on February 24th, which was yesterday. It was a very short meeting, light agenda, but Dr. Regina Speaker, who's the director of Montgomery County IU, did report that the IU continues to facilitate countywide superintendent meetings. And they're now planning to expand those meetings to include school district leaders from Bucks, Chester, and Delaware County as well. And that they're hoping to facilitate some discussions on how to safely hold spring activities such as prom and graduation. So let's hope that there's some great debate among the superintendents and discussion, and we figure out how to do that. We also had a pretty lengthy discussion on the recently released federal statement on standardized assessments. It was recommended that if any interested members of the board, you know, do want to discuss that with the legislature, that they should contact legislatures at the national level, not our state level, particularly Senate Education Committee Member Chair Patty Murray and Ranking Member Richard Burr, and House Education Majority Chair Bobby Scott, and Minority Chair Virginia Fox, and of course our local rep Madeline Dean. They definitely recommended that it's the federal level that we need to talk to if you have any concerns regarding standardized testing of our students for this year. The IU has begun discussion with their employee groups, and those are going very well, and they hope to be ready for a board vote in April, well before the contract expires at the end of June. And our next board meeting is March 24th, 2021. Any questions for me? Seeing none, I'm going to return it to Mrs. Cunningham.
Thank you. We will move on to Legislative Liaison Report. Ms. Pennypacker.
Just a reminder, March 22nd is Virtual Advocacy Day. We need everyone to help strengthen our advocacy impact. The day will center on contacting legislators to discuss critical issues affecting public education. Dr. Roach has included Advocacy Day information in his board updates to us, so please check out the information in the update. This week, PSBA President Art Levinowitz from the Upper Dublin School District presented testimony to the House Education Committee regarding the impact of the pandemic on education. He stated that as the pandemic lingers into 2021, school leaders will face several continuing related challenges, including the need to identify and address the pandemic impacts caused or the academic impacts caused by the reduction of face-to-face instructional time. The pandemic has brought many financial challenges for school districts which have not only faced significantly increased costs in dealing with COVID-19, but which also who also expect to lose as much as $850 million to $1 billion in local tax revenue due to the pandemic. President Levinowitz emphasized that there are many ways in which the General Assembly can continue to support public schools during the crisis. He said that public schools need solutions which provide savings and flexibility without the need for new or additional state appropriations. Senate Bill 73 was introduced, a proposal which would establish a program to allow public schools to apply to the Pennsylvania Department of Education for a waiver of many, but not all, state-imposed mandates. Certain laws and regulations would not be waivable, such as those relating to student health and safety, academic standards and assessments, special education, protected handicapped students, gifted education, student attendance, and professional educator conduct standards, among others. Senate Bill 73 has been referred to the Senate Education Committee for consideration. More than 370 school boards representing nearly 75% of the districts across the state have now adopted PSBA's resolution calling for meaningful charter school funding system. And Mrs. Cunningham, I don't know if you want to interject here and mention about that op-ed that you signed.
Yes, yes, charter school reform. I put my name on that Google form, and Alan, can you share that with us all at the board update? That would be great. And that way, if anybody else wants to sign, they can feel free to do that, because I've been harping on that all night. Need to get those kids back.
Thank you. The NSBA virtual conference will be held April 8th through the 10th this year. And the 2021 PASA PSBA School Leadership Conference will be held September 27th through the 29th at hopefully Kalahari Resort and Conventions in the Poconos. If any school board members would like more information about these and other legislative matters, please feel free to contact me. And if there are no questions, this concludes the legislative liaison report. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Alan.
I just wanted to say, following up on Mrs. Pennypacker's comment there about the online virtual NSBA, it will be in the board update tomorrow. But if anyone is interested in being registered for that, so please let me know ASAP so we can take care of that. It is a virtual conference. The information will be there tomorrow. But if I would know early next week, we could get that set up for you. There's no information, just the date and time, just the date and the potential location for the one in September, but that'll be available for the board as well. I think that typically would be the one that was in Hershey, which I know we've had board members attend in the past. So obviously when we get that information in the summer, we'll put that out there. But I would encourage anyone to participate in either of those or both if possible.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the Upper Perk Education Foundation. Mr. Elliott.
There was no meeting. I have nothing to report. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to give my time back to Mrs. Cunningham. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Regional Planning Commission Representative, Dr. Drake.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. There was a meeting held yesterday, February 24th. A couple highlights. One is there's a comprehensive plan. The 10-year plan is going to commence this year. They're going to hire a consultant to help work with that. Talk about planning for the next 10 years for the county in terms of zoning, businesses, and general usage of natural resources. Then in terms of our townships, the individual updates, there were a couple highlights. One is Green Lane had, the Lions Club had donated some money for repair at Isaac Smith Park, the roofs on the kitchen and the restrooms. So thank you to the Lions Club and for the community to fix that. Another interesting point was Upper Hanover. There's going to be a Wawa put in, or at least there's a proposal to put it in at the Northgate area. So I believe they had the first proposals this week. So within 10 to 15 months, there'll be a Wawa at the Northgate area. So that's something interesting.
Wait,
So
for real?
That's what they're saying. I guess it has to get through all the approval process, but it's it's starting. I saw the drawing.
Nice.
So, and then also the Perk Up, they made a mention that there's nominations for awards for small business leadership awards and education awards. So they're looking for nominations. So if anybody has any community businesses they're interested in nominating for those awards, please see the Chamber of Commerce. And that concludes the legislative liaison. Actually, it's a very interesting committee. So thank you, Mrs. Cunningham, for putting me on it this year. First time.
Yep, it's a fun one. I did that one myself. And I nominate Wawa as a small business to be anything.
Okay, I like Turkey Hill because it's right 3 blocks from my house. But anyway, it's good to have competition.
Yep.
Sheets, all the way.
Sheets is good.
Yeah, Sheets is good too.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you
Anyway,
for your report.
that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions, anyone? Okay, hearing none, I will move us on to public comments. Do we have any public comments? Dr. Farina? No?
Oh. One, Aaron.
One?
One.
Okay.
Hi, Aaron, can you hear us?
Hello, yes, this is Jake Engel. How are you?
Hi, Jake. Just remind us of your township of residence and full name. Thank you.
Sure, I'm from Upper Hanover Township. Appreciate everybody's time. I just wanted to chime in. I apologize, I missed a portion of the meeting. I just basically, looking at the charts from K to 6, mostly the numbers got a little less clear when it got over 6th grade, but to basically keep a hybrid model over 1 or 2 students to be over the threshold of keeping a 6-foot distance just seems, I understand that we want to keep this 6 foot, and I get the reasons for it. Don't get me wrong, but truly seeing them numbers that these classrooms are 1 or 2 students over, that is stopping the district from going to a full-time model for them age groups is kind of surprising. And I think the benefits, far outweigh the cons to that. It's, again, the parents can decide whether the risk is worth it for their children, and for the UPEA to make the stance that they care about the children and they have to stay 6 feet apart, and that's an absolute. I respect them caring about our children, but adding 1 or 2 desks into a classroom is not going to reduce the distance from the students to the teachers. The teachers are still going to have just as much space with 1 or 2 more desks in a classroom. So, I really hope that this board, takes everything into consideration. And I know it's a tough decision, but just kind of hearing the UPA and their stance on everything just really seems like they're just pushing to keep this as is. And in my opinion, as a parent, with the Wednesday virtual learning, there's very little teaching going on, and it's just hard to really understand why that model is staying in place, because Wednesdays are really a wasted day in the week. And I hope everybody kind of takes everything into consideration. I appreciate your guys' time, and I apologize for being as harsh as I was during the last meeting. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
I might be against protocol here, but it's a workshop, so what the heck. Jake, I would encourage you to check out the Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting. It's on YouTube, to hear about what's going on the Wednesday. So I get it. I got kids too. And the Wednesdays are the independent learning, but the work that goes on behind the scenes to make the hybrid model work is, we're asking a lot of our teachers in the hybrid model. So if you get a chance, dude, check that meeting out. I think you'll find it informative. It was really good. So it just adds some layers on. You had some great points and stuff like that. Very valid, and we appreciate you speaking. But just check that meeting out. It's pretty cool.
It was enlightening. Dr. Farina, do we have any more?
No other hands.
No other hands? All right. Having no more hands, we'll move on to board comments. Anyone have a comment? Or are we all commented out?
There's been a lot of comments tonight, a lot of discussion.
Yes, there has.
Wait, I'm on the timer? 2 minutes? It's probably not a bad idea.
Tough for Mike.
Yeah, for Mike, that might not be a bad idea.
Sorry, force of habit. My bad.
No, that's totally cool. No, I mean, everybody's putting a lot of time and effort into this, and obviously the teachers and the administrators and the staff. Obviously, myself and fellow board members, there's a lot of like things going on. So we're just, we're really trying to make the best decisions that we possibly can. So thank you very much for your patience and understanding with all that. And I think we did something good tonight with the kindergarten. That's pretty exciting. So.
Yep, I agree. Anybody else?
I just make a quick comment. Oh, go ahead, Keith.
Go ahead, Mike, or Kerry, go ahead.
I just want to reiterate again how excited I am that we did finally do the kindergarten. I mean, we talked about it for a long time. It really seemed to be the right thing to do, and it's an honor to work with all you, both the board and the administration, to do all that deep dives, to dig to what we need to do, and then to get a great plan out and do it. So, thank you to everybody for that. And again, I'm really excited to see that implemented. I can't wait to see what September looks like.
I agree.
I'll jump in real fast.
Go ahead, Keith.
I just wanted to remind everybody that, all these meeting videos are on UPTV, on YouTube. Go and watch them. I've been attending the last few meetings, or at least watching them. If not attending them, watching them on the YouTube channel. They are informative. If you have time to, you want to educate yourself on what's going on in the district. We had a lot of our educational staff attending the past few meetings, and it's great to see that interaction. If you're wondering what's going on in the district, what's happening in the facilities meeting or the curriculum and instruction or finance, go and watch the meetings, please.
Yep, agreed. This was a four committee week, so yes, this was a long one. Anyone else have comments? If not, I would call for a motion to what.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Melanie, you're muted.
Sorry. All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you, everyone. I just realized
Good night,
what
all.
time it was.
Thank you.
And a good meeting. And go full day K.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you.